The night Mara Harrow watched her sister's future get stolen by her own hands started with a single question she should never have answered. Duke Cale Thornridge didn't come to their frozen borderland estate looking for the forgotten sister. He came for Lillian, the perfect one, the chosen one, the girl who'd been groomed since birth to marry power. But when his cold gray eyes found Mara across that first dinner table, something shifted, something dangerous. And in the days that followed, every stolen conversation, every forbidden glance, every moment they shouldn't have shared became another nail in the coffin of the only family Mara had left. Stay with me until the end. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The morning Duke Thornridge's caravan appeared on the horizon, Mara was in the stables mucking out stalls. Not because the estate lacked servants, her father employed dozens, but because it kept her out of the house, away from the frantic preparations, away from Lillian's dress fittings and mother's shrill commands and the suffocating reality that her older sister was about to marry into one of the most powerful families in the northern reach. Mara drove the pitchfork into soiled hay and leaned against the stall door, watching dust motes drift through the cold morning light. Her hands were rough, nails permanently stained despite scrubbing. Not the hands of a lady, but then nobody expected her to be one. "Mara!" The voice cut through the stable's quiet. Beth, one of the kitchen girls, stood in the doorway wringing her apron. "Your mother's having a fit. The Duke's party will be here within the hour and you're—" She gestured helplessly at Mara's work dress, at the hay in her dark hair. "I know." "Then move." She said if you're not presentable, she'll lock you in the east wing for the duration. Mara grabbed her cloak. Mother would absolutely make good on that threat. She'd done it before, during the governor's visit last spring. Easier to hide the disappointing daughter than explain why she didn't sparkle like Lillian. The house was chaos. Servants rushed through the hallways carrying linens, flowers, bottles of wine from the cellar. Cook's voice boomed from the kitchen, threatening someone with a ladle. In the main parlor, Lillian stood on a platform while two seamstresses made final adjustments to her gown, deep emerald silk that made her auburn hair look like captured fire. She was breathtaking. She always was. "There you are." Mother appeared at Mara's elbow, lips pressed into a thin line. Catherine Harrow was a handsome woman, though years of social climbing had carved sharp edges into her features. "Upstairs, now. Anna's drawn you a bath." "Mother, I can just—" "You will bathe, you will dress in something appropriate, and you will stay silent unless directly addressed. Do you understand?" Mara's jaw tightened. "Yes, ma'am. And for heaven's sake, do something about your hair. You look like you've been living in the barn." I have been, Mara thought, but kept it behind her teeth. Upstairs in her room, smaller than Lillian's with a window that overlooked the servants' courtyard instead of the gardens, Anna had indeed prepared a bath. The lady's maid was one of the few people who didn't treat Mara like a stain on the family tapestry. "It's not fair, you know," Anna said quietly as she helped unlace Mara's work dress. "The way they talk about you." "It's fine." "It's not." Anna guided her toward the copper tub. "You're every bit as—" "Don't." Mara stepped into the hot water, hissing at the temperature. "Please. I've made my peace with it." That was a lie, but a useful one. The truth was messier. Mara had learned young that fighting for recognition in this family was like fighting the tide, exhausting and pointless. Lillian was the sun around which the household orbited. Mara was just there, a shadow at the edge of the light. She'd stopped resenting it somewhere around her 16th birthday. Stopped trying to compete. It was easier to be invisible. The bathwater turned gray with stable dirt. Anna worked the hay from Mara's hair with patient fingers, then helped her into a simple dress. Dove gray, high-necked, utterly forgettable. Perfect. "You could wear the blue one," Anna suggested. "The one with the—" "This is fine." In the mirror, Mara studied her reflection. Where Lillian was fire and porcelain skin, Mara was darker, brown hair that refused to hold a curl, eyes that shifted between gray and green depending on the light, a face that was pleasant enough but unremarkable. Not ugly, just ordinary. The sound of horses and carriage wheels on gravel echoed from outside. "They're here," Anna whispered. Mara's stomach nodded. She pressed a hand against her ribs, willing the anxiety down. This wasn't her event. She just had to get through it without embarrassing the family. Stand in the background, Smile when expected, vanish when not needed. She could do that. She'd been practicing her whole life. The main hall was arranged like a stage set. Father, Lord Marcus Harrow, a man who'd built his fortune on timber and shrewd northern investments, stood at the center, with Mother beside him. Lillian waited 3 steps behind, the picture of demure elegance. Mara took her place near the wall, partially obscured by a decorative column. The doors opened. Duke Cale Thornridge entered like winter itself. He was tall, broader through the shoulders than Mara expected, with dark hair and a face that looked carved rather than born. Maybe 30, though it was hard to tell. He had the kind of features that could be 25 or 40 depending on the light. He wore black and gray, expensive but understated, with a heavy cloak still dusted with road snow. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Gray, cold, assessing. They swept the room with the efficiency of a man cataloging assets, and Mara felt the temperature drop when his gaze passed over her position by the column. For half a heartbeat, those eyes locked with hers. Then they moved on. Duke Thornridge. Father stepped forward, hand extended. Welcome to Harrow Hall. We're honored by your presence. Lord Harrow. The Duke's voice was deep, controlled. He shook Father's hand with the bare minimum of warmth. Thank you for your hospitality. May I present my wife, Lady Catherine? Mother curtsied with practiced grace. Your Grace, we've prepared your apartments in the East Wing. And this, Father continued, barely suppressing his pride, is my eldest daughter, Lillian. Lillian stepped forward. The movement was choreographed. She'd practiced it for weeks. A perfect curtsy, eyes lowered demurely, then a smile that could melt iron. Your Grace, welcome to our home. Cale studied her for a long moment. Miss Harrow. He didn't smile, didn't offer his hand, just nodded once, then returned his attention to Father. I trust the journey wasn't too difficult. The northern roads can be treacherous this time of year, Father said. But your men seem capable. They are. Cale gestured, and 2 men entered behind him. A captain of the guard, scarred and weathered, and a younger man who had the look of a steward or secretary. This is Captain Rourke and my advisor, Finn. They'll coordinate with your household regarding accommodations for my men. The next few minutes were a blur of logistics. Mara stayed perfectly still against her column, watching everything. The way the Duke's men moved with military precision. The way Lillian kept glancing at Kyle, trying to catch his eye again. The way Mother's smile grew more strained with each moment Kyle failed to show appropriate interest in her daughter. Perhaps, Mother finally said, voice tight, you'd like to rest before dinner, Your Grace. The journey from Thornridge Keep is considerable. That would be acceptable. Cale turned toward the stairs, then paused. His gaze swept the room again, slower this time. It landed on Mara. She froze. The column wasn't enough cover. He was looking directly at her now, those cold gray eyes pinning her in place. For 3 heartbeats that felt like hours, he simply stared. Then, and you are? Every head in the room swiveled toward her. Mara's throat went dry. Her voice came out rough. She cleared it. Mara Harrow, Your Grace, the younger daughter. I see. Something flickered across his expression, too fast to read. Miss Mara. He nodded once, the same curt acknowledgement he'd given Lillian, and followed the steward toward the stairs. The moment he disappeared, Mother's hand closed around Mara's elbow like a vice. The column, she hissed. I told you to stay behind the column. You drew his attention, on purpose. I didn't. Enough. Mother's nails bit through fabric. You stay out of sight until dinner, and during dinner you speak only if directly addressed. Am I clear? Mara pulled her arm free. Perfectly. She fled to her room and didn't come out until Anna knocked 2 hours later to help her dress for dinner. The formal dining room could seat 40, but tonight only the immediate family and the Duke's closest men would eat. Mara was placed at the far end of the table, between Finn, the Duke's advisor, and an empty chair that would remain empty. Perfect. She could eat in silence and disappear afterward. Lillian sat across from Kyle, with Mother and Father flanking them like proud generals. The first course arrived, winter soup with herbs from the greenhouse, and conversation began in fits and starts. Your estate is impressive, Kyle said, more statement than compliment. I understand the timber operation is substantial. Father brightened. Indeed. We supply most of the reach, and shipments go as far south as the capital. Lillian has been learning the business. Has she? It wasn't a question. Cale's tone was flat, and Mara saw Lillian's smile falter. Yes, Lillian said quickly. Father's been teaching me about contracts, and do you enjoy it? Silence. Lillian's smile froze. It was a trap of a question. Admit she hated the business, and she seemed frivolous, claim she loved it, and risk seeming unfeminine. I find it interesting, she said carefully. The strategy involved. Understanding what people need. Understanding what people need, Kael repeated. He took a drink of wine. That's a useful skill. Mother jumped in. Lillian has always been remarkably perceptive. Even as a child, she could read a room better than, and you, Miss Mara? The question cut through the table like a blade. Every fork paused. Mara looked up to find Kael watching her, his expression unreadable. Me, Your Grace? Do you work in the family business as well? No, I don't. What do you do? It was the most dangerous question anyone had asked her in years. The truth. Nothing of value, nothing that matters, nothing that would make my family proud. Sat on her tongue like poison, but something in his eyes stopped her from lying. I manage the stables, she said quietly, and the hounds. I handle correspondence with our suppliers, small things. Small things? Kael set down his wine glass. Are they small? Your Grace. The stables, the hounds, supplier relationships. Are these small matters to an estate of this size? Mara's pulse kicked up. I suppose not. But they're not. They're just necessary. Someone has to. Exactly. He leaned back in his chair, still watching her. Someone has to. And you chose to be that someone. It wasn't praise. It wasn't criticism. It was just observation. But it landed in Mara's chest like a struck bell, resonating in ways she didn't understand. Across the table, Lillian's face had gone carefully blank. Mara has always been very practical, Mother said, voice sharp. But tell us, Your Grace, about Thornridge Keep. We've heard the architecture is quite remarkable. Kael allowed the subject change, and the conversation shifted to safer ground. But for the rest of the meal, Mara felt his attention like heat against her skin. Not constantly. He spoke to Father about trade routes, asked Lillian polite questions about the estate's social calendar, discussed military matters with Captain Rourke, but his eyes kept returning to her. By the time dessert arrived, Mara's nerves were frayed. She needed to leave, needed air, needed to think. If you'll excuse me, she murmured to Finn, who nodded absently. She stood, curtsied toward the head of the table, careful not to meet Kael's gaze, and slipped out through the servant's door. The corridor was blessedly quiet. She leaned against the wall, pressing cool stone against her flushed face. What was that? He shouldn't have noticed her, shouldn't have asked her anything. The entire evening was designed to showcase Lillian, and instead, running away? Mara spun. Kael stood 3 feet behind her, wine glass in hand, expression as unreadable as ever. Your Grace, I wasn't. You bolted from the table like it was on fire. I needed air. Because I spoke to you. It wasn't a question. Mara's hands twisted in her skirt. You shouldn't have. Why? Because I'm not. She stopped, forced herself to breathe. You're here for Lillian. Everyone knows that. Talking to me just complicates things. Does it? He took a step closer. How? People will think. What will they think, Miss Mara? She met his eyes and immediately regretted it. Up close, that gray was like winter sky, vast and depthless. That I'm trying to get above myself, that I'm trying to steal attention, that I'm interesting? The word hit like a slap. Mara's breath caught. I came here for a strategic marriage, Kael continued, voice low. An alliance that benefits both families. Your sister is beautiful, well-trained, everything the position requires. Then why? Because she bores me. He said it without cruelty, just flat honesty. Every word out of her mouth is calculated. Every smile is performance. I've met 100 women like her. She's good at it, Mara said, surprised by the defense in her voice. She's been trained for this her whole life. She'll be an excellent duchess. Probably. Kyle took another step. They were close enough now that Mara could smell leather and snow on his cloak. But you didn't answer my question at dinner. The real question. What question? Do you want to manage stables and hounds and supplier letters? Mara's throat tightened. No one had ever asked her that. Not once. It doesn't matter what I want. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. She forced herself to hold his gaze. I'm the spare daughter, Your Grace, the one nobody planned for. I make myself useful where I can. That's my role. And if you could choose a different role? I can't. But if you could. The question hung between them, dangerous and impossible. Mara thought of 1,000 things: travel, education, freedom to choose her own path, and pushed them all down. It doesn't matter, she said again. You should go back. They'll notice you're gone. Let them notice. Your Grace, Kyle. His voice dropped. When we're alone, call me Kyle. Every alarm in Mara's head started screaming. This was wrong. This was dangerous. This was the kind of conversation that ruined lives. I can't, she whispered. Why? Because it would be a betrayal. Something flickered in his expression. Approval, maybe, or respect. Of your sister. Of everyone. Mara stepped back, putting precious distance between them. You need to choose Lillian. She's perfect for this. And I need to stay out of the way. That's how this works. What if I don't want it to work that way? Then people get hurt. Mara's voice cracked. Please, just go back to dinner. For a long moment, Kyle didn't move. Then he set his wine glass on a nearby table, turned, and walked back toward the dining room without another word. Mara waited until her hand stopped shaking before following. 10. The next 3 days were torture. Kale spent his mornings touring the estate with father, discussing contracts and trade agreements. He spent his afternoons with Lillian, walks in the garden, carefully chaperoned, where she performed flawlessly. She laughed at his observations, asked intelligent questions, presented herself as the ideal partner. And every evening at dinner, Kyle asked Mara questions. Not constantly, not enough to seem inappropriate. Just enough. Miss Mara, what's your opinion on the northern border disputes? Miss Mara, do you ride? Miss Mara, I noticed the hounds are exceptionally well trained. Is that your work? Each question was a knife in Lillian's composure. Mara watched her sister's smiles grow more brittle, saw the confusion and hurt building behind her eyes. Mother's disapproval radiated across the table like frost. But Mara couldn't not answer. Refusing would be insulting, so she kept her responses short, factual, desperately trying not to engage. It didn't work. On the 4th morning, Mara woke before dawn and fled to the stables. Maybe if she stayed out of the house, stayed away from the breakfast table, Kyle would forget about her. Focus on Lillian the way he was supposed to. She was brushing down her mare when she heard boots on stone. I thought I'd find you here. Mara didn't turn around. You shouldn't have looked. Kyle moved to the next stall, running a hand along the door. Your mother tried to lock you in your room this morning. Did you know that? She's done it before. Your sister cried after you left dinner last night. The brush stilled in Mara's hand. I know. Then why are you still talking to me? I'm not. You're talking to me. I've tried. Her voice broke. I've tried to stay away, but you keep... I know. Kale's voice was rough. I shouldn't. This is exactly the kind of complication I came here to avoid. Then stop. I can't. The admission hung in the cold, stable air. Mara finally turned to face him. He looked tired, she realized, like he hadn't been sleeping. Your Grace, I told you, Kyle. Your Grace, she said firmly, you need to propose to Lillian. Today. Tomorrow at the latest. The longer you wait, the more people will talk, and the harder it will be for everyone. Is that what you want? It doesn't matter what I... Stop saying that. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides. Stop pretending you don't matter. Stop hiding. I'm not hiding. I'm surviving. Mara's hands fisted in her skirt. Do you know what happens to women like me? Women who get ideas above their station? Who reach for things that aren't meant for them? You'd be reaching for me. I'd be choosing you. That's not above your station. That's me making a choice. A choice that destroys my sister. She'll survive. She's beautiful, well-trained, from a good family. She'll find another match. Not like you. Mara's eyes burned. You're the best offer she'll ever get. You're the future she's been promised since she was 10 years old, and you want me to just… What? Let you throw that away because you find me interesting? Yes. The word was brutal in its honesty. Mara shook her head. I won't do it. I won't be the reason her life gets ruined. Even if it means saving your own? My life isn't at stake. Isn't it? Kale moved closer. You're 23, Mara. What happens when your sister marries? When your parents don't need you for another alliance? Where do you go? She'd thought about it, late at night when sleep wouldn't come. The most likely answer was a marriage to some minor northern lord who needed connections more than companionship. A quiet life managing his household, burying his children, fading into obscurity. I'll manage, she whispered. You'll disappear. His hand came up, hovering near her face but not quite touching. And the world will lose something real. Mara's breath caught. Please don't. Don't what? Don't make me hope. The words came out broken. Don't make me think there could be something different, because when you choose Lillian, and you will, I need to be okay with it, and I can't do that if you… What if I don't choose her? Then I lose my sister, my family, everything I've ever known. Mara stepped back, breaking whatever spell had fallen between them. And maybe you're worth it. Maybe being with you would be worth all that burning, but I'll never know because I won't put it to the test. She brushed past him, heading for the stable door. Mara. She stopped but didn't turn around. The ball is in 3 days, Kael said quietly. I'm expected to make my formal proposal there, in front of everyone. I know. What if I don't? Her hands trembled. Then you'll break her heart in the cruelest way possible. And what about your heart? Mara looked back over her shoulder, met those gray eyes one last time. My heart's been broken since the day I realized I'd never be enough for anyone to choose. One more crack won't kill it. She left him standing in the stable, surrounded by horses and morning light, and didn't let herself cry until she was locked in her room. The next 2 days blurred together. Mara stayed in her room as much as possible, claiming a headache. Anna brought food and worried looks, but didn't press for details. Outside her window, the estate prepared for the ball. Carriages arrived carrying neighboring families, the Ashfords, the Blackwoods, the Sterlings, all eager to witness the Duke of Thornridge's formal proposal. Musicians set up in the ballroom. The kitchen produced feast-worthy meals in preparation for the main event. And through it all, Mara heard Lillian's laughter drifting up from the gardens, bright and sharp with relief. Kyle had apparently stopped asking about Mara. He'd spent the previous day entirely in Lillian's company, riding through the estate, dining privately, doing all the things a man about to propose should do. Mother's mood had improved considerably. The evening before the ball, there was a knock at Mara's door. She expected Anna, but found Lillian instead. Her sister looked radiant. Happiness had smoothed the tight edges from her expression, made her eyes bright. She was wearing rose-colored silk that complemented her complexion perfectly. May I come in? Mara stepped aside. Lillian entered, moving to the window seat where she'd spent countless hours as children before everything got complicated. I wanted to thank you, Lillian said softly. Mara's chest tightened. For what? For whatever you said to him. In the stables. Lillian met her eyes. I don't know what happened between you two, and I don't want to know. But he changed after that morning, started paying attention to me. Really paying attention, not just being polite. That's good. Is it? Lillian's voice was careful. You look miserable. I have a headache. Mara. I'm fine, Lily. Really. The childhood nickname slipped out unbidden. You should get some rest. Tomorrow's a big day. Lillian stood, crossed the room, and did something she hadn't done in years. She hugged Mara. Tight and fierce, like they were children again, before the world taught them to be rivals. I know I haven't been kind, she whispered. I know Mother and Father made me the favorite, and I didn't fight it. I should have. You deserved better. Mara's eyes burned. Lily. But tomorrow, when he proposes, I'm going to say yes. And then I'm going to make sure you're taken care of. A good match, a proper dowry. You won't be forgotten. I promise." She pulled back, smiled, genuine this time, and left. Mara stood alone in her room as sunset bled across the walls and wondered if heartbreak was supposed to feel this much like drowning. The ball began at 8. Mara dressed in blue this time, Anna's insistence, though she felt like a fraud in the borrowed finery. Her hair was pinned up, a few dark curls framing her face. She looked not like Lillian, but not entirely like herself either. "You're beautiful," Anna whispered. "I'm adequate." "You're stubborn." Anna adjusted the necklace at Mara's throat. Simple silver, nothing flashy. "And you're allowed to be beautiful, even tonight." Especially tonight, Mara thought. The last night before everything changed. The ballroom was magnificent. Candles everywhere. Winter flowers arranged in massive displays. Musicians playing in the corner. Every important family for 50 miles had crowded in, dressed in their finest, waiting for the evening's main event. Mara entered quietly, keeping to the edges. Lillian stood near the center of the room in a gown that must have cost a fortune. Deep burgundy with gold embroidery, cut to perfection. She looked like a queen already, and beside her, speaking with Lord Ashford, stood Kyle. He wore black and silver, formal but understated. His expression was the same mask of control he'd worn since arriving. But when his eyes swept the room and landed on Mara, something cracked in that careful composure. He'd seen her. Mara looked away, pulse hammering, and headed for the refreshment table. She made it approximately 3 minutes before he found her. "Miss Mara." She turned, wineglass clutched too tight. "Your Grace. You're wearing blue. Very observant. It suits you." His voice was low, careful. They were in public now. Every word could be overheard, every glance interpreted. "May I have this dance?" Mara's heart stopped. "That's not a good idea. It's a ball. Dancing is expected." "With your betrothed, yes. Not with one dance." His hand extended. "Then I'll let you go." She should refuse, should walk away, should do the smart, safe thing. Instead, she set down her wineglass and placed her hand in his. The music was a waltz. Of course it was. Cale's hand settled at her waist, proper and distant, but Mara felt the touch like a brand through the fabric. They moved into the pattern, and for a few measures, neither spoke. "You're avoiding me again," Cale said finally. "I'm making this easier." "For who?" "Everyone." Mara kept her eyes on his shoulder. "This is the right thing. You know it is." "Do I?" "You've spent 2 days with her. You've seen how perfect—" "She's not you." "That's the point." Mara's voice rose, and she immediately lowered it. "She's better than me. Better suited for this. You'll be happy with her." "Will I?" His hand tightened fractionally at her waist. "Because the last 2 days have been agony. Pretending to care about garden design and guest lists and all the polite, meaningless conversation that makes up a courtship. That's what marriage is for people like you. Beautiful, polite, strategic. What if I don't want that? Then you're a fool." Mara finally looked up, met his eyes. "Because what you're suggesting, choosing me over her, it's not romantic, it's not noble, it's cruel and selfish, and it ruins lives." "Just hers? Or yours too?" The question landed like a punch. Mara stumbled slightly, and Kyle's grip steadied her. "I'll survive," she whispered. "That's not the same as living." The music swelled. Around them, other couples moved through the pattern, oblivious to the knife edge they were balanced on. "Promise me something," Mara said. "What?" "After tonight, after you propose, promise me you won't look for me, won't speak to me. Just let me go." Cale was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "If that's what you want?" "It is." Another lie, but a necessary one. The waltz ended. Cale released her with visible reluctance, stepped back, bowed formally. "Thank you for the dance, Miss Mara." "Your Grace." She curtsied and walked away on shaking legs, found a chair in a shadowed corner, and tried to breathe through the pressure in her chest. Half an hour passed. Then another. The ball continued, bright and celebratory, and Mara watched from the edges as she always did, until the music stopped. Lord Harrow stood at the center of the ballroom, wineglass raised, smiling like he'd won the lottery. My friends, family, honored guests, if I could have your attention. The crowd quieted. Lillian moved to stand beside Father, radiant with anticipation. Mother beamed from her position near the musicians. As you all know, Father continued, we've had the great honor of hosting Duke Thornridge these past weeks. And tonight, I'm pleased to announce, actually, Cale said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. If I may, Lord Harrow. Father's smile faltered slightly, but he nodded, stepping aside. Cale moved to the center of the floor, every eye in the ballroom fixed on him. Lillian's expression was pure joy. This was it, the moment she'd been raised for. I came to Harrow Hall, Kyle said slowly, seeking a marriage alliance, a strategic partnership that would benefit both families. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. I've spent this time getting to know the Harrow family, their business, their values, their strengths. Lillian's hands clasped in front of her, waiting. And I've come to a decision. The room held its breath. Kyle's eyes swept across the ballroom, past Lillian, past Lord and Lady Harrow, across dozens of expectant faces, and landed on Mara. Miss Mara Harrow, he said clearly, would you join me? The silence was deafening. Mara's heart stopped. She couldn't have heard that correctly. Couldn't. Mara, Kyle repeated, louder this time. Please. Every head in the ballroom turned to stare at her. She saw shock, confusion, dawning horror as people realized what was happening, saw Mother's face drain of color, saw Father's expression cycle through disbelief to rage, and saw Lillian standing frozen in the center of the floor, her perfect smile shattered into something unrecognizable. Mara's legs moved without conscious thought. She stood, took one step forward. Stop! Her mind screamed. This is wrong. This is betrayal. This destroys everything. But Kyle was looking at her like she was the only person in the world, like she mattered, like she was worth choosing. She took another step, then another. The crowd parted. Someone gasped. Mara heard whispers starting. What is she doing? Has she lost her mind? This is madness. But they sounded distant, underwater. She reached the center of the ballroom, stood 3 feet from Kyle, from the man who'd just blown her life apart. Your Grace, she whispered. What are you doing? Choosing. His hand extended between them. The question is, will you let me? Mara looked at that offered hand, then passed it to Lillian's stricken face. Her sister's eyes were wide, bright with unshed tears, and in them Mara saw every shared memory, every childhood moment, every sisterly bond, all of it burning in real time. She saw her mother's rage, her father's disgust, the entire ballroom's judgment. She saw her old life crumbling, and she saw Kyle's hand, steady and certain, waiting for her answer. This is wrong, her heart whispered. This ruins everything. This makes you the villain. But her hand, traitor, fool, desperate thing, reached out anyway. And when her fingers touched his, the world exploded into chaos. The first sound was a wineglass shattering against marble. Someone, Mara never found out who, had dropped it in shock. The crystal explosion seemed to break whatever spell had held the ballroom frozen. Suddenly everyone was talking at once, voices rising in a cacophony of scandal and disbelief. Kale's hand tightened around hers. Don't let go. Mara couldn't have if she'd wanted to. Her entire body had locked, every muscle rigid with the crushing weight of what she'd just done. Around them, the crowd pressed closer, a wall of shocked faces and pointing fingers. This is outrageous, Mother's voice cut through the chaos. She pushed forward, face white with fury. Mara, step away from him this instant. But Mara couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her eyes found Lillian across the space between them. Her sister stood exactly where she'd been, still wearing that broken smile. Tears streamed down her face now, cutting tracks through carefully applied powder. She wasn't making a sound. That somehow made it worse. Just standing there, dying quietly while everyone watched. Lillian, Mara whispered. Don't. Lillian's voice cracked. Don't you dare say my name. Father grabbed Kale's shoulder, spinning him around. What the hell do you think you're playing at? I'm not playing. Kale's voice was ice. Remove your hand, Lord Harrow. You came here for her. Father pointed at Lillian. We had an understanding, An agreement. You can't just, I can. I am. Kael finally released Mara's hand, but only to put himself between her and the advancing crowd. I'm choosing Mara. The arrangement is dissolved. The ballroom erupted again. Mara heard Lady Ashford's scandalized gasp, saw Lord Sterling whispering furiously to his wife. The musicians had stopped playing entirely, instruments hanging forgotten as they stared. You'll regret this, Mother hissed, pushing past Father to glare at Mara. Do you understand what you've done? What you've destroyed? I didn't. Mara's voice failed. I didn't mean... She didn't do anything, Kael said sharply. This was my choice. Then you're a fool. Father's face had gone purple. Mara is nothing. She has no training, no accomplishments, no value as a wife. You're throwing away a perfect alliance for what? A stable girl? The words hit like physical blows. Mara flinched and Kael's entire body went rigid. Careful, he said, voice dropping to something dangerous. You're talking about the woman I intend to marry. Silence crashed down. Even the whispers died. Lillian made a sound, half sob, half gasp, and fled. The crowd parted for her like water, and she disappeared through the ballroom doors in a flash of burgundy silk. The noise that followed her exit was deafening. Everyone talking over each other, scandalous speculation building with every second. Mara heard fragments, shameless, always knew she was jealous, must have seduced him, poor Lillian, and felt something inside her crack. I need to... She turned toward the doors. I need to talk to her. Not yet. Kael's hand caught her wrist. Let her calm down first. Calm down? Mara's laugh was sharp, broken. I just stole her future in front of 100 people. She's never going to calm down. She's going to hate me for the rest of her life. And she should, because this is enough. Kael pulled her closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. Listen to me. What's done is done. You can't take it back. The only choice now is whether you're going to fall apart or stand up. I can't. You can. His gray eyes held hers, steady and sure. You're stronger than you think, stronger than they've let you believe. So stand up. Mara's throat burned. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to somehow undo the last 5 minutes. But Kael was right about one thing. There was no taking this back. The moment she'd touched his hand, she'd set something in motion that couldn't be stopped. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, met her mother's furious gaze. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I never wanted this, but I can't. I won't refuse him. Mother's slap came so fast Mara barely saw it. Her head snapped to the side, cheek exploding with pain. The ballroom gasped. You ungrateful little... Kael moved. 1 second he was beside Mara, the next he was between them, his hand locked around Mother's wrist. Touch her again, he said softly, and you'll regret it. She's my daughter. I'll discipline her as I see fit. She's under my protection now. That makes her untouchable. Kael released Mother's wrist and turned to Father. Lord Harrow, I believe this conversation would be better continued in private. Father's jaw worked. For a moment, Mara thought he might refuse, might cause an even bigger scene. Then he jerked his head toward the door. My study. Now. He stalked out. Mother followed, shooting Mara a look of pure venom. The crowd watched them go, then slowly, reluctantly, began to disperse. The musicians started playing again, something light and meaningless, trying to salvage the evening. But the damage was done. This ball would be talked about for years. Kael offered Mara his arm. Come on. Where? Somewhere you can breathe. He guided her through the thinning crowd, past staring eyes and whispered judgments. They made it to the library, blessedly empty, before Mara's legs gave out. She sank into a chair, hands shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. That was... She couldn't finish, couldn't find words for the catastrophe they'd just created. Kael poured brandy from the decanter, pressed the glass into her hands. Drink. She did. The alcohol burned, but it cut through some of the shock. When she looked up, Kael was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Why? The question came out broken. Why did you do that? You could have chosen her, should have chosen her. Instead you... I told you, I chose what I wanted. You chose to destroy her. I chose to be honest. Kael poured his own drink, downed it in one swallow. Your sister would have been a perfectly adequate duchess. Beautiful, accomplished, trained. But every conversation with her was performance, every smile calculated. I would have spent my entire life with a stranger. And me? Mara's voice rose. You barely know me. We've had, what, a dozen conversations? You're willing to blow up 2 families for that? Yes. The certainty in his voice was terrifying. You're insane, Mara whispered. This is insane. In an hour, my father's going to disown me. My mother already hates me. And Lillian, her voice cracked. Lillian will never forgive me. I just became the villain in her story, in everyone's story. Or you became the woman who stopped letting other people write her ending. That's not... Mara set down the brandy before she dropped it. You don't understand. I can't be what you need. I don't know how to be a duchess. I don't know politics or strategy or how to manage a great house. I'll embarrass you, fail you. You won't. How do you know? Because you're not afraid to tell the truth. Kael moved closer, crouching so they were eye level. Everyone else in this house has spent weeks telling me what they think I want to hear. You're the only one who's been honest, even when it hurt. That's not enough, Mara said desperately. Honesty doesn't make me qualified. It doesn't make me worthy. Kael's hand came up, fingers gentle against her bruised cheek. Your family's spent your entire life convincing you that you're not. But they're wrong. Mara wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly her chest ached. But the reality was crushing. She'd just destroyed her sister's future for a man she barely knew, based on feelings that might evaporate the moment real life set in. Before she could respond, the library door slammed open. Anna stood in the doorway, face flushed from running. Miss Mara, you need to come. Now. Mara stood. What happened? It's Miss Lillian. She's locked herself in her room and won't come out. Your mother's threatening to break down the door, and she's saying things... Anna's voice dropped. Terrible things about you, please, before this gets worse. Mara looked at Kael. He nodded once. Go. I'll handle your father. She wanted to argue that splitting up was a bad idea, that they needed to face this together. But Anna was already pulling her toward the hallway, and the fear in the maid's eyes killed any protest. The walk to Lillian's room felt like a death march. Servants pressed against walls as they passed, staring with undisguised fascination. Mara heard her name whispered, heard speculation and judgment, and felt each word like a lash. Outside Lillian's door, Mother was pacing like a caged animal. When she saw Mara, her expression twisted into something ugly. You, she spat. This is your fault. She won't eat, won't speak, just crying and crying until I can't... Her voice broke. Fix this. Make this right. How? Mara asked quietly. How am I supposed to fix it? Refuse him. Tell the Duke you made a mistake. Beg Lillian's forgiveness and let things go back to the way they should be. Mara's hands curled into fists. Part of her wanted to sacrifice whatever chance at happiness she'd found to restore her sister's future. It would be the noble thing, the selfless thing. But Kael's words echoed in her head. You became the woman who stopped letting other people write her ending. I can't, she said. Mother's face went white. Can't or won't. Does it matter? The slap would have landed if Anna hadn't stepped between them. Lady Harrow, please. This isn't helping Miss Lillian. Mother's hand trembled. Then she lowered it, pressed her fingers to her mouth. Get out of my sight, both of you, before I do something we'll all regret. She fled down the hallway, leaving Mara and Anna alone outside the locked door. Lily? Mara pressed her hand against the wood. It's me. Please open up. Silence. I know you hate me right now. You should. What I did was... Her voice caught. It was unforgivable, but please, let me explain. Let me... There's nothing to explain. Lillian's voice came through the door, thick with tears and rage. You wanted him. You took him. That's all there is. That's not... I never meant for this to happen. I tried to stay away. Tried to push him toward you, but he kept... Kept what? Noticing you? Lillian laughed, broken and bitter. Poor Mara, so tragic that the Duke found her interesting. Must have been such a burden. It was. Mara's palm flattened against the door. Every conversation with him was torture because I knew it hurt you. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop yourself? The doorknob rattled, but didn't turn. That's what you're going with? You had no choice? I had a choice, Mara whispered. I made it, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back my future. I know. Sorry doesn't undo the humiliation of standing in that ballroom while my own sister stole my betrothed. I know. Then what good is it? Lillian's voice rose to something raw. What good is your sorry when I've spent 25 years being perfect, being everything they wanted, being the daughter who mattered, and you still won? The word hit like a knife between ribs. Won. As if this was a competition, as if Mara had been playing some long game to destroy her sister's life. This isn't winning, Mara said quietly. This is me losing everything I've ever known for something I might not even be able to keep. But you're right. That's my choice, my risk, and I'm taking it. Silence stretched. Then, I hope it destroys you. I hope he realizes what a mistake he made, and you end up alone and ruined and exactly as worthless as we always knew you were. The words should have hurt more than they did, but Mara had already accepted the truth. Her sister was gone. The Lillian she'd grown up with, the girl who'd once braided her hair and shared secrets, was dead, killed by betrayal in front of 100 witnesses. I hope you find happiness, Mara said to the closed door. Somehow, eventually. She turned and walked away before Lillian could respond. Anna followed her down the hallway, footsteps quick. Miss Mara, where are you going? I don't know. Mara's voice sounded distant to her own ears. Somewhere that isn't here. She ended up in the stables. Of course she did. It was the only place that had ever felt safe. The horses didn't judge, didn't whisper, didn't look at her like she was a cancer growing in the family. She was brushing down her mare when she heard boots on stone. Your father wants you gone by morning. Mara turned. Kael stood in the stable entrance, jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, older than before. Gone where? Thornridge Keep, with me. He moved to the next stall, ran a hand along the door, just like he had that first morning. The wedding will be held there, 3 weeks from now. 3 weeks? Mara's hand stilled. That's not enough time. Your father made it clear we're not welcome here any longer than necessary, and frankly, I'd rather not spend another night under his roof. But the contracts, the arrangements, are being finalized as we speak. Your father's eager to be rid of you. Kael's voice was flat. He made that abundantly clear. Mara set down the brush. What did he say? It doesn't matter. Tell me. Kael was quiet for a moment. Then, he said I was welcome to you, that you'd always been more trouble than you were worth, and he pitied me for the burden I was taking on. The words should have devastated her. Instead, they just felt expected. Of course, that's what Father thought. Of course, he'd been waiting for an excuse to wash his hands of the disappointing daughter. And what did you say? That if he ever speaks about you that way again, in public or private, I'll make sure every trading partner he has knows exactly what kind of man he is. Kael's gray eyes found hers. Your mother tried to negotiate, offered to double Lillian's dowry if I'd reconsider. And? I told her the only woman I'm marrying is standing in this stable. Mara's throat tightened. You shouldn't have burned those bridges. My father's trading network could have been useful to you. I don't need his network. Kael crossed to where she stood, close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw. I need you to understand something. This isn't a political alliance anymore. This isn't strategy. What happened tonight? I chose you, Mara, publicly, irrevocably, and I don't regret it. You might, she whispered, when the scandal settles and you're stuck with a wife who can't navigate court politics, who embarrasses you at every state function, who tells the truth. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing the bruise Mother's slap had left, who sees the world clearly instead of through layers of performance and lies, who makes me feel something other than boredom and duty. That's not enough to build a marriage on. Maybe not for other people, but I've spent 10 years in a political marriage to a woman I tolerated at best. My first wife died hating me, and I can't say I blamed her. I won't do that again. I won't spend another decade pretending. Mara stared at him. You were married before? She died 3 years ago. Fever. We had no children. She considered that a blessing by the end. Kael's expression was carefully neutral. Everyone expected me to remarry quickly. I waited because I couldn't face the thought of another arrangement, another performance. So you came here looking for what? Something real? I came here because your father made a compelling financial proposal. I stayed because you made me remember what it felt like to want something. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Mara wanted to pull away, to protect herself from the weight of it, but Kael's hand was warm against her face, and she was so tired of being alone. I'm going to hurt you, she said quietly. Not on purpose, but I will. Because I don't know how to be what you need. Then we'll figure it out together. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Unless you've changed your mind, unless you want to walk away. Did she? It would be easier, safer. She could refuse him, beg her family's forgiveness, fade back into obscurity. Live out her days managing stables and supplier contracts, invisible and unthreatening, or she could take the terrifying leap into a future she had no map for. I haven't changed my mind, Mara whispered, but I'm scared. Good. So am I. The admission surprised her. You're scared? Terrified. Kael's smile was slight, barely there. I just blew up a major alliance, scandalized 2 families, and committed to a woman I've known for less than 2 weeks. If I wasn't scared, I'd be insane. Despite everything, Mara felt her lips twitch. We're both insane then. Probably. He lowered his hand but didn't step back. We leave at first light. Pack what matters, everything else can be sent later. My parents won't see me off. No, they won't. Lillian will probably celebrate. Yes, the entire region will talk about this for years. Undoubtedly, Kael's expression softened. But you'll be at Thornridge, away from all this, starting fresh. Starting fresh. The concept was so foreign, Mara couldn't quite grasp it. She'd lived in this house, in this shadow, for 23 years. The idea of leaving, of becoming someone new somewhere else, was both exhilarating and terrifying. What if I can't do it? She asked. What if I get to Thornridge and I'm still just me? Still not enough? Then you'll be yourself somewhere that actually values it. Kael stepped back, giving her space. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be difficult. He left before she could respond. Mara stood alone in the stable, surrounded by horses and familiar smells, and tried to imagine a different life. Tried to picture herself as a duchess, managing a great house, standing beside Kael at formal functions. The image wouldn't come into focus. All she could see was Lillian's broken face, mother's fury, father's dismissal, the family she was leaving behind. Anna found her an hour later, still standing in the same spot. Miss Mara, you need to pack. I know. Then why are you still here? Mara looked at the maid, one of the few people who'd ever treated her kindly. Will you come with me? To Thornridge? Anna's eyes widened. You want me to? I need someone I can trust, someone who doesn't… Mara's voice caught. Someone who doesn't hate me. I don't hate you, Anna said firmly. And yes, I'll come. The relief was overwhelming. At least she wouldn't be entirely alone. They packed through the night. Mara took her books, her riding clothes, a few pieces of jewelry her grandmother had left her. Everything else, the fancy dresses, the delicate shoes, the useless accomplishments of a daughter being groomed for marriage, she left behind. Dawn came cold and gray. Mara dressed in traveling clothes and descended to the main hall for the last time. Kael was already there with his men, horses ready. He looked up when she appeared, and something in his expression eased. Ready? No, Mara said honestly. But I'm coming anyway. Captain Rourke helped Anna into one of the carriages. Finn was coordinating with the stable master about the horses. Everything was efficient, organized, moving forward with inevitable momentum. Mara looked up at the house one last time, wondered if Lillian was watching from her window, if Mother would regret how this ended, if Father would even notice she was gone. Mara. Kael stood beside his horse, hand extended. It's time. She took his hand, let him help her into the saddle. They moved down the drive in a quiet procession, leaving Harrow Hall behind. They'd made it perhaps half a mile when Mara heard hoofbeats behind them. She turned, heart leaping, Had Lillian come to say goodbye? To forgive her? But it was Father who appeared, riding hard with 3 men behind him. Cale raised a hand, halting the group. "Lord Harrow, I thought we'd concluded our business." "You thought wrong." Father's face was mottled red, veins standing out on his forehead. "You're not taking her." "That's not your decision." "Like hell it isn't. She's my daughter. She stays here." "She's an adult," Kyle said evenly, "and she's made her choice. A choice you manipulated her into." Father kicked his horse closer, voice rising. "I don't know what you said to her, what promises you made, but I won't allow this farce of a marriage. I'll see you in court. I'll have the betrothal dissolved." "On what grounds?" Cale's voice dropped to something dangerous. "The contracts were signed last night, legal and binding. Your daughter is under my protection now." "She's confused, scared. You've taken advantage." "I'm not confused." Mara surprised herself by speaking. "And I'm not scared." That was a lie, but Father didn't need to know that. "Mara, please." Father's voice shifted, taking on a pleading edge she'd never heard before. "Come back to the house. We'll discuss this properly. Whatever the Duke offered you, I can—" "You can what?" Mara's hands tightened on the reins. "Suddenly value me? Suddenly see me as something other than a burden? It's too late for that. Don't be dramatic. You're throwing away your family over some infatuation that won't last a month." "Maybe it won't," Mara agreed. "Maybe I'm making the worst mistake of my life, but it's my mistake to make. Not yours, not Mother's, mine." Father stared at her like she was a stranger. "You ungrateful little—" "Enough." Cale's horse moved between them. "Turn around, Lord Harrow. Go home. You've lost this fight. I'll destroy you," Father said quietly. "Both of you. Every trading partner, every alliance, every connection I have. I'll use them to make sure you regret this." "Try." Cale's smile was cold. "See how far that gets you." They stared at each other, 2 men locked in a battle neither could win. Then Father jerked his reins, wheeled his horse around, and rode back toward the house without another word. His men followed. Mara watched them go, feeling something crack and settle in her chest. That was it then. The final bridge. Burned. "You all right?" Kyle asked quietly. "Ask me again in a month." He nodded once, then signaled the group to move forward. They rode in silence for the next hour. The landscape shifted from familiar territory to unknown ground, and Mara felt each mile like a physical distance from everything she'd ever known. At midday, they stopped to rest the horses. Mara dismounted, legs shaky from riding, and leaned against a tree while the men set up a quick camp. Anna appeared with water and bread. "You should eat." "I'm not hungry." "Eat anyway." Anna pressed the bread into her hands. "You'll feel better." Mara doubted that, but she took a bite to make Anna happy. The bread tasted like dust. "Miss Mara?" Anna's voice was careful. "Did you mean it? What you said to your father?" "Which part?" "About making your own mistakes." Mara looked at the younger woman, barely 20, with her whole life ahead of her. "Yes. I meant it. Even if this all falls apart, at least it'll be because I chose it, not because someone else decided for me." Anna nodded slowly. "Then I'm glad I came with you." They reached an inn by nightfall. Kael had sent riders ahead to arrange rooms, separate ones, Mara noted with relief. She wasn't ready for the reality of sharing a bed with a man who was still essentially a stranger. Dinner was quiet, eaten in a private room away from the common area. Captain Rourke reported on the day's progress. Finn discussed logistics for their arrival at Thornridge. Kael listened, asking occasional questions, and Mara felt like a ghost at her own table. "You're quiet," Kael observed after the others had left. "Tired." "That's not all." Mara set down her wine glass. "I keep thinking about Lillian, wondering if she's okay." "She will be, eventually." "How can you be sure?" "Because people like your sister, beautiful, accomplished, from good families, they always land on their feet. She'll mourn, then she'll rage, then she'll move on. Find another match. Maybe better than me." "You don't believe that?" "No," Kael admitted. "But it's what you need to hear." Mara looked at him. This man who'd upended her life, who'd chosen her over the perfect option, who was now stuck with a woman who had no idea how to be what he needed. "Why?" she asked. "Really? Why me? Cale was quiet for a long moment. Then, my first wife was a lot like Lillian. Beautiful, trained, perfect. We had nothing to say to each other. Every conversation was choreographed. Every interaction was performance. And I spent 7 years dying of boredom while she died of loneliness. That's not my fault. No. But it taught me what I didn't want. And when I met you, he stopped, started again. You were brushing down a horse, covered in stable dirt. And when I asked you a question, you answered honestly instead of telling me what you thought I wanted to hear. It was the first real conversation I'd had in years. That's a pretty thin reason to blow up an alliance. Maybe, but I'd rather risk everything on something real than spend another decade pretending. Mara wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the ways this could go wrong, but exhaustion was pulling at her, and the wine had made her thoughts fuzzy. I should sleep, she said finally. Kyle stood, moved to her chair, and offered his hand. She took it, let him help her up. They stood close enough that she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the gray threading through his dark hair. 3 weeks, he said quietly. Then you'll be my wife. 3 weeks, she echoed. It felt like a death sentence and a promise all at once. Cale pulled his hand back first, the movement deliberate. Sleep well, Mara. She didn't. Sleep was a stranger that night, replaced by hours of staring at unfamiliar ceiling beams, while her mind replayed every catastrophic moment of the ball. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lillian's face, heard Mother's venom, felt the weight of 100 judging stares. By the time dawn crept through the window, Mara felt hollowed out. The journey to Thornridge Keep took 4 more days. 4 days of riding through increasingly harsh terrain, of sleeping in progressively smaller inns, of watching the landscape shift from rolling farmland to rocky foothills to the brutal wind-scarred mountains of the northern reach. Cale rode beside her most days, though they didn't talk much. The silence between them had changed since that first night. Less comfortable, more weighted with unspoken questions neither seemed ready to ask. On the 3rd day, they passed through a small market town. The locals stared at their party with the mix of curiosity and suspicion reserved for nobility. Mara caught fragments of whispered conversation as they purchased supplies. Heard the Duke chose the wrong sister. Scandal. Absolute scandal. Can't imagine what the family must think. Anna moved closer, blocking Mara from view. Ignore them. They don't know anything. They know enough. Mara kept her eyes forward, spine straight. If she was going to be the subject of gossip, she'd at least give them nothing else to feed on. That evening, stopped at an inn barely large enough for their party, Finn approached Mara in the common room. Duchess-to-be. He had a pleasant face, Finn, open and younger than his 30-odd years suggested. Might I have a word? Mara gestured to the empty seat across from her. Of course. Finn sat, folding his hands on the scarred wooden table. I wanted to discuss Thornridge, so you're not walking in blind. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just realistic. Finn's expression was carefully neutral. The keep is old, older than most of the holdings in the Reach. It's been in the Thornridge family for 6 generations, and it shows. The West Wing needs repairs. The staff is loyal, but set in their ways. And the household, he paused. The previous Duchess left an impression. Mara's stomach tightened. What kind of impression? The distant kind. Lady Elise was from the capital, city-bred, unused to northern winters and northern ways. She tried to change things, make the keep more refined. The staff resented it. She resented them. By the end, she barely left her rooms. And you're telling me this because? Because you're not her. Finn met her eyes. But they don't know that yet. They'll be watching, judging, comparing. Some will assume you're another southern flower who'll wilt in the cold. Others will remember the circumstances of your engagement and wonder what kind of woman steals her sister's betrothed. The bluntness was almost refreshing. What do you suggest? Be yourself. Don't try to be Lady Elise. Don't try to be whatever you think a duchess should be. The staff can smell performance from a mile away. They lived with it for 7 years. Finn's smile was slight. His Grace chose you for a reason. Trust that it was the right one. After he left, Mara sat alone with her cooling tea and tried to imagine navigating a household full of hostile servants while carrying the weight of scandal on her shoulders. The prospect made her want to run. She might have if Anna hadn't appeared with a plate of bread and cheese and the kind of practical determination that left no room for argument. Eat, then sleep. Tomorrow we reach Thornridge, and you need your strength. Mara obeyed, too tired to fight. They arrived at Thornridge Keep late the following afternoon, and Mara's first thought was, this is a fortress, not a home. The keep rose from the mountainside like something carved from the stone itself, all sharp angles and gray walls with narrow windows that looked more suited to archers than light. The main gate was reinforced iron, the outer walls thick enough to withstand a siege. Everything about it screamed defense, strategy, survival. Nothing about it whispered welcome. It's impressive, Mara said, because something needed to be said. Cale's mouth twitched. It's brutal, I know. My grandfather built most of this during the border wars, function over form. Does it ever get warm? In summer, for about 3 weeks. Perfect. She was marrying into a frozen fortress ruled by ghosts and hostile staff. What could possibly go wrong? The gates opened as they approached. The courtyard beyond was enormous, designed to hold troops and supplies during sieges. Now it just felt empty, echoing with the sound of their horses' hooves on stone. The household staff waited in a neat line near the main doors. Perhaps 40 people, all dressed in the dark gray and silver that seemed to be Thornridge colors. They stood perfectly still, perfectly silent, watching Kyle dismount with practiced efficiency. Then their eyes shifted to Mara, and she felt the judgment like a physical thing. An older woman stepped forward, late 50s, iron gray hair pulled back so tight it must hurt, expression carved from the same stone as the keep itself. She curtsied to Kyle with precision. Your Grace, welcome home. Mrs. Rothwell. Cale's voice warmed fractionally. Everything in order? Of course, Your Grace. The woman's gaze flickered to Mara, still seated on her horse. And this is Miss Mara Harrow, my betrothed. Cale moved to help Mara down. His hands at her waist were steady, grounding. She'll be mistress of this house in 3 weeks. I trust you'll make her welcome. Mrs. Rothwell's expression didn't change. Of course, Your Grace. Miss Harrow, welcome to Thornridge Keep. The words were correct. The tone was ice. Mara forced herself to smile. Thank you, Mrs. Rothwell. I look forward to learning from you. That got a flicker of something. Surprise, maybe, or reassessment. Mrs. Rothwell inclined her head fractionally. I've prepared the blue room for you. Anna, is it? She looked at Mara's maid. You'll be in the servants' quarters, 3rd floor. Anna curtsied. Mrs. Rothwell rattled off a series of instructions to the staff, who dispersed with military efficiency. Within minutes, their bags were being carried inside. Horses led to the stables, the courtyard clearing. Cale offered Mara his arm. Come on, I'll show you around before dinner. The keep's interior matched its exterior, stone and iron, function over comfort. The main hall was cavernous, with a fireplace large enough to roast an entire deer. Tapestries hung on the walls, faded and moth-eaten in places, depicting battles Mara didn't recognize. The furniture was heavy, dark, built to last centuries. Cale led her through corridors that twisted and climbed, pointing out rooms she'd never remember. The library's there. The armory's off limits, unless you're with me or Captain Rourke. Servants' areas are marked. You won't need to go there, but if you do, knock first. Knock on the servants' quarters? They value their privacy. Elise used to storm through whenever something displeased her. Didn't make her popular. They climbed a wide stone staircase to the 2nd floor. The corridors here were narrower, with thick carpets that muffled sound. Kyle stopped outside a heavy oak door. This is yours, for now. He pushed it open. The blue room was aptly named, everything in shades of blue and silver, from the heavy curtains to the bedspread to the ceramic wash basin. It was beautiful in a cold, formal way, not cozy, not welcoming, but spacious and well-appointed, and completely separate from wherever Kyle slept. I'm across the hall, he said, reading her unspoken question. After the wedding, you can move to the Duchess's chambers in the East Wing, or not. It's your choice. Where did Lady Elise stay? The East Wing. She redecorated extensively. His tone was carefully neutral. I had it locked after she died. Haven't opened it since. 3 years of a locked room, preserved like a shrine or a tomb. Mara didn't ask which. I'll stay here, she said. After the wedding, I mean, if that's all right. Something in Kael's expression eased. It's your home now. Do what feels right. After he left, Mara stood in the center of the blue room and tried to imagine it feeling like home. The task seemed impossible. Anna arrived an hour later, flushed and breathless. The staff is gossiping. I heard 3 different versions of how you supposedly seduced the Duke, each more creative than the last. Let them gossip. One of them said you used witchcraft. Despite everything, Mara felt her lips twitch. Witchcraft? Really? Apparently you brewed a love potion in the stables. Anna started unpacking, shaking out dresses with practiced efficiency. Also, half the female staff is in love with his grace, so you've made enemies just by existing. Wonderful. Mrs. Rothwell is the worst. She keeps talking about poor Lady Elise and how some women simply aren't suited to northern life. Anna's impression of the housekeeper's clipped tones was spot on, but the cook seems decent, and the stablemaster, Mr. Garrett, he asked about you specifically. Wanted to know if you actually managed your family's stables or if that was just talk. What did you tell him? The truth, that you know more about horses than most men he'd meet. Anna grinned. He looked interested. One ally, then? Better than nothing. Dinner that night was served in a formal dining room that could seat 30 but currently held only Mara, Kael, Finn, and Captain Rourke. The food was good. Roasted meat, winter vegetables, dark bread, but Mara barely tasted it. She was too aware of servants moving in and out, their eyes constantly assessing her. You're doing well, Finn said quietly. Sitting up straight, using the right fork, better than many who were born to it. I had training, Mara said. Mother insisted. Just because I wasn't the chosen one didn't mean I could embarrass the family. Well, it's paying off now. Was it? Mara wasn't sure. She felt like an imposter playing dress-up, waiting for someone to call her out. After dinner, Kael caught her arm gently. Walk with me? They ended up in the library, a massive room lined floor to ceiling with books, smelling of leather and old paper. A fire crackled in the hearth, the only source of warmth in the vast space. This was my favorite room as a child, Kael said, running his hand along a shelf. I used to hide here when my father was in one of his moods. Was he cruel? He was a soldier. Everything was discipline and duty and strength. Sentiment was weakness. Kael pulled down a worn volume, flipped through it without reading. He died when I was 16. Left me the title, the keep, and a list of expectations I've been failing to meet ever since. Mara moved closer to the fire, holding her hands out to the warmth. What expectations? Multiple heirs, strategic alliances, expansion of family holdings. Respect through power. He replaced the book. I managed one strategic marriage that produced no heirs and ended with my wife dead and everyone involved miserable. Not exactly the family legacy he envisioned. And now you've scandalized half the reach by choosing the wrong sister. Now I've chosen the woman I wanted instead of the woman I was supposed to want. Kael turned to face her. There's a difference. Your father wouldn't have seen it that way. No, he'd have called me weak, said I was thinking with my... He stopped. He'd have disapproved, loudly. Lucky he's not here then. Lucky, Kael agreed, though his tone suggested otherwise. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the fire. Then Mara asked the question that had been eating at her since they arrived. Do you regret it, choosing me? No. No hesitation. Do you regret saying yes? I don't know yet. Honesty seemed important, even when it hurt. Ask me again after the wedding, or after the first time your advisors tell you I'm a liability, or after... Mara. He crossed to where she stood, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. Stop waiting for me to realize I made a mistake. I didn't. You can't know that. I can, because every other option involved pretending for the rest of my life. And I'm done pretending. He kissed her then. Quick, firm, unexpected. It was nothing like the chaste courtship kisses she'd imagined. This was claiming, possession, a promise of things Mara wasn't ready to think about. When he pulled back, her hands were fisted in his shirt. 3 weeks, he said quietly. Then you're mine. He left her standing by the fire, heart racing, wondering if she'd just made the best or worst decision of her life. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparations. Mrs. Rothwell managed everything with ruthless efficiency. Invitations sent to neighboring families, menus planned, the chapel readied. Mara was fitted for a wedding gown by a seamstress who clearly thought she was unworthy of the fabric. The previous duchess wore white silk with seed pearls, the woman said, pins in her mouth. This ivory is simpler. Simpler is fine, Mara said through gritted teeth. Anna stood in the corner, radiating silent support. Later, in the privacy of the blue room, she let her thoughts loose. That woman is a nightmare. The previous duchess this, Lady Elise that, as if you're supposed to measure up to a dead woman's ghost. Maybe I am, Mara said quietly. Stop that. Anna pointed a hairbrush at her. You're not Lady Elise, you're better. You don't know that. I know you didn't lock yourself in your rooms and die of loneliness. I know you're trying, even though half this household wants you to fail. That's better. Mara wanted to believe her. 5 days before the wedding, a letter arrived from Harrow Hall. Mrs. Rothwell delivered it personally, her expression carefully neutral. This came by courier, Miss Harrow, marked urgent. Mara's hands trembled as she broke the seal. She recognized Lillian's handwriting immediately. The perfect flowing script they'd both been taught, but only Lillian had mastered. The letter was short. I wanted to hate you. I tried. But mostly, I just feel empty. Mother says I should forget you exist. Father's already removed your portrait from the gallery. They're telling everyone you ran off to marry the Duke in secret, that it was all planned, that you were never really part of the family anyway. Maybe that's easier for them than admitting what actually happened. I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe because I need you to know that you didn't just take my future. You took my past too. Every memory I have of us is poisoned now. Every moment we shared feels like a lie. I hope you're happy with what you've won. I hope it's worth what you destroyed. Don't write back. I won't read it. Mara read it 3 times, then carefully folded it and placed it in her desk drawer. Her hands were steady. Her eyes were dry. Anna found her an hour later, still sitting at the desk, staring at nothing. Miss Mara? My family disowned me. Mara's voice was flat. Officially. They've removed my portrait. They're rewriting history, so I was never really theirs to begin with. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's cleaner this way. No messy family obligations, no pretending at holidays, just done. But her hands trembled when she stood, and Anna pretended not to notice. That night at dinner, Kael asked if she was all right. I'm fine. You're lying. Yes. Mara set down her fork. But I'll be fine. Eventually. He reached across the table, covered her hand with his. The gesture was simple, grounding. You're not alone in this. I feel alone. I know, but you're not. 2 days before the wedding, the guests began arriving. Minor nobility from across the reach, all eager to witness the scandalous marriage firsthand. Mara heard their whispers in the corridors, saw their assessing looks over dinner. One woman, Lady Ashford, a friend of Kael's late wife, cornered Mara in the library. So you're the one who caused all the fuss. Her tone was pleasant, but her eyes were sharp. I knew Elise. We were close. She would have been appalled by all this. I'm sorry for your loss, Mara said carefully. Are you? Lady Ashford's smile was thin. Or are you just sorry you have to hear about her? Both can be true. I suppose they can. The older woman studied Mara like a curiosity. Everyone's wondering if you'll last longer than she did. I give it a year, personally. Northern winters are brutal for Southern girls. I'm not from the South. No, but you're not from here either. And this place? She gestured at the stone walls. It eats the weak. Mara held her gaze. Then I'd better not be weak. Something flickered in Lady Ashford's expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. No, I suppose you'd better not. The night before the wedding, Mara couldn't sleep. She paced the blue room until Anna threatened to tie her to the bed, then finally grabbed a cloak and slipped out into the corridors. The keep was different at night. Shadows everywhere, the wind howling through unseen gaps in the stone. Mara found herself walking without direction, just moving to quiet the panic building in her chest. Tomorrow she'd become a duchess. Tomorrow, she'd marry a man she barely knew in front of people who thought she was a scheming opportunist. Tomorrow, her life would change irrevocably. She was terrified. She ended up in the chapel, a small stone room in the oldest part of the keep, lit only by moonlight through narrow windows. Simple wooden pews, a plain altar, nothing ornate. It felt ancient, heavy with the weight of centuries. Couldn't sleep either? Mara spun. Kyle stood in the doorway, also in nightclothes and a cloak. He looked as tired as she felt. I keep thinking about tomorrow, Mara admitted. About standing up there in front of everyone and promising forever to someone I've known for 3 weeks. It's tradition to have doubts the night before. Kyle moved into the chapel, sat in one of the pews. My first wedding, I spent the entire night before getting drunk with Rourke. Did it help? No, I woke up hungover and still had to get married. He patted the bench beside him. Sit. She did. The wood was cold through her cloak. I'm going to be a terrible duchess, Mara said quietly. I don't know how to navigate court politics. I don't know how to manage a household this size. I don't know. You'll learn. What if I can't? What if I embarrass you? What if... Mara. Cale's hand found hers in the darkness. I need you to understand something. I didn't choose you because I thought you'd be perfect. I chose you because you're real. Because when I talk to you, I don't have to translate through 7 layers of propriety and performance. Because you're honest, even when honesty is inconvenient. Honesty doesn't make me qualified to be a duchess. Maybe not. But it makes you someone I can actually build a life with. Someone I can trust. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. I've had perfect. Perfect was lonely and cold and empty. I'll take real over perfect any day. Mara wanted to believe him. Wanted to let go of the fear and just trust that this could work. Tomorrow, she whispered, when I walk down that aisle, half the people there will be hoping I trip. Probably. And the other half will be judging every word I say, every move I make. Definitely. So what do I do? Kyle turned to face her, his gray eyes serious in the moonlight. You hold your head up, you say your vows, and you remember that their opinions don't matter. The only person you need to satisfy tomorrow is yourself. And you. I'm already satisfied. They sat in the quiet chapel for another hour, not talking much, just existing in the same space. When Mara finally rose to leave, Kyle caught her hand one more time. Thank you, he said. For what? For saying yes, for not running, for being brave enough to take this risk. His smile was slight. I know it's not easy. Nothing worth having ever is. She left him there and somehow made it back to her room. Anna was waiting, wrapped in a blanket, dozing in the chair. You should be asleep, Mara said softly. Anna's eyes opened. So should you. Big day tomorrow. I know. Nervous? Terrified. Good. Anna stood, started turning down the bed. Means you're paying attention. Now sleep. You need to look perfect when you marry that man and prove everyone wrong. Mara slept fitfully and woke to Anna shaking her shoulder. It's time. The wedding gown was beautiful in a simple way. Ivory silk, fitted bodice, long sleeves against the cold. No elaborate beading or lace, just clean lines and quality fabric. Mara stood while Anna laced her in, pinned her hair up, added a delicate silver circlet. In the mirror, she looked like a stranger, like someone who deserved to wear this dress, to marry a duke, to stand as mistress of Thornridge Keep. The illusion was almost perfect, until she looked in her own eyes and saw the fear. You can do this, Anna said firmly. You've faced worse. Have I? You walked away from your family. You chose yourself over everything you've ever known. This is just the next step. Just the next step. As if marrying Kyle was the easy part. The chapel was packed, every pew filled with northern nobility, all dressed in their finest, all staring as Mara entered. She walked alone. No father to give her away, no family to stand witness, just her, the gown, and the weight of 100 judging eyes. Kyle waited at the altar in dark formal wear, his expression unreadable. Beside him stood Finn and Captain Rourke as witnesses. Mara forced herself to walk steadily, keeping her spine straight and her eyes forward. She would not stumble, would not give them the satisfaction. When she reached the altar, Kyle extended his hand. She took it, felt the warmth of his grip, and some of the fear eased. The priest began the ceremony. Traditional northern vows older than the keep itself. Mara barely heard the words. She was too focused on breathing, on standing, on not letting the panic show. "Do you, Mara Harrow, take this man?" Movement in the back of the chapel cut off the priest's words. The doors slammed open, and a woman stood framed in the entrance. Lillian. She looked wild, hair loose, traveling clothes dusty and wrinkled, eyes bright with something Mara couldn't name. Behind her stood 3 men Mara didn't recognize. The chapel went silent. "Stop," Lillian said clearly. "Don't do this." Kael's hand tightened on Mara's. "This is a private ceremony. You're not welcome here." "I don't care." Lillian moved down the aisle, and the crowd parted like she was carrying plague. "Mara, please, before you do something you can't undo." "It's already done," Mara said quietly. "The moment I took his hand at the ball, the moment I left Harrow Hall, this is just making it official. It doesn't have to be." Lillian stopped 3 pews away. Up close, Mara could see she'd been crying. "I came to tell you, to warn you." "Warn me about what?" "About him." Lillian pointed at Kael. "About what really happened to Lady Elise. About why she died locked in her rooms, alone and miserable." The chapel erupted in whispers. Kael went rigid beside Mara. "That's enough," he said, voice tight. "Is it?" Lillian's laugh was sharp. "Or does your new bride deserve to know what kind of man she's marrying? What kind of death sentence she's walking into?" Mara looked between them. Her sister, wild and desperate, and her almost husband, carved from stone in silence. "What are you talking about?" she asked. "Ask him," Lillian said. "Ask him how his first wife really died. Ask him about the bruises the servants whispered about. Ask him about the nights she spent screaming. Lies." Kael's voice cut like a blade. "Every word. Elise died of fever. There was an inquest. A doctor's report. Written by men you paid. Written by professionals. You're making accusations based on nothing but spite." "Am I?" Lillian's eyes were bright. "Or am I trying to save my sister from making the worst mistake of her life?" Mara's mind raced. This couldn't be true. Kael wasn't, he wouldn't, but doubt had already taken root. She looked at him, this man she barely knew, this man she was about to legally bind herself to forever. "Is it true?" she whispered. Kael's expression was carefully controlled, too controlled. "No." "Then why did Lady Ashford say this place eats the weak? Why did Mrs. Rothwell look at me like I was walking into a tomb? Why?" "Because Elise was miserable here," Kael said tightly. "Because she hated the North, hated the keep, hated me for bringing her here. She made herself ill with loneliness and resentment, but I never touched her in anger, never. The servants gossiped. As servants do, none of them were in our chambers. None of them know what happened between us." His hands cupped Mara's face, forcing her to look at him. "I swear to you, on everything I am, I never hurt her. She died of fever. That's the truth." Mara wanted to believe him, desperately. But Lillian stood there, her sister who had every reason to lie, but whose eyes held nothing but genuine fear. "Mara, please," Lillian said, "come home. We'll fix this. We'll make it right. Just don't..." "Don't what?" Mara pulled away from Kael's grip. "Don't marry him? Don't choose my own life? Don't dare to want something for myself? Don't throw yourself away on a man who might kill you." The words echoed in the stone chapel. Every eye was on Mara now, waiting to see what she'd do. She looked at Kael, at the man who'd chosen her, who'd burned his own alliances to have her, who claimed he wanted something real. At the man who might be exactly what Lillian warned. Then she looked at her sister, at the woman whose future she'd stolen, who'd traveled days to deliver this warning, who claimed to be saving her. At the woman who might just be trying to destroy her one last time. Mara's hands trembled, her heart hammered. The entire chapel held its breath, and she made her choice. "Get out!" Mara's voice cut through the chapel's shocked silence. Not loud, not hysterical, just cold, flat, final. Lillian blinked. "What?" "I said get out." Mara took a step toward her sister, hands steady despite the chaos roaring in her head. "You had your say, now leave." "Mara, I'm trying to save..." "Save me?" Mara's laugh was sharp enough to draw blood. You rode for days to crash my wedding with unsubstantiated accusations and 3 hired men as backup. That's not salvation, Lillian. That's revenge. Lillian's face flushed. That's not... I came because I was worried. Were you? Or did you come because you couldn't stand the thought of me actually being happy? Mara moved closer, and something in her expression made Lillian step back. Because every word out of your mouth sounds less like concern and more like spite. The servants talked about bruises. Servants gossip. They always have. Mara glanced at Mrs. Rothwell, standing frozen in the second pew. Isn't that right, Mrs. Rothwell? The housekeeper's mouth pressed into a thin line. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, Lady Elise was fragile. She bruised easily, from fever, from weakness. The doctor documented it. But the screaming, she had nightmares. Mrs. Rothwell's voice was clipped. Toward the end, when the fever was worst, we all heard them. But His Grace was never in her rooms during those episodes. He slept in his own chambers. Lillian's certainty wavered. But you don't know anything about this place, Mara said quietly. You don't know these people. You don't know what happened here. You just needed a weapon, and you found one. That's not fair. Fair? Mara felt something crack in her chest. Not breaking, but shifting, realigning into something harder. You want to talk about fair? You had everything, Lillian. Mother's love, father's pride, every advantage our family could provide. And the one time something chose me over you, you couldn't handle it. He was mine. Lillian's voice rose, tears streaming now. You knew that. Everyone knew that. And you took him anyway. He was never yours. He was a contract, an arrangement. Mara glanced at Kael, still standing rigid at the altar. And he chose differently. That's not theft. That's him exercising free will. You seduced him. I existed. That's all. I was honest when he asked questions. I didn't perform. And apparently that was enough. Mara's voice softened fractionally. I'm sorry that hurt you. I am, but I'm not sorry I said yes. Lillian stared at her like she was a stranger. I don't know you anymore. Good. Because the Mara you knew was half-formed, molded by people who saw her as spare parts. Mara straightened her spine, felt the wedding gown settle around her like armor. This version is mine, and she's done apologizing for wanting something. For a long moment, Lillian just stood there. Then she turned to Kael, eyes blazing. If you hurt her, if she ends up like Lady Elise, she won't, Kael said evenly. Because unlike Elise, Mara chose to be here. She chose me, knowing the risks, knowing the scandal. That makes all the difference. Lillian's jaw worked. Finally, she looked back at Mara. I hope you're right. I hope this works out exactly how you want. But when it doesn't, when you realize what you've given up for this, don't come crawling back. I won't, Mara said. Mara. Lillian fled. The 3 men followed, and the chapel doors slammed shut behind them with violent finality. The silence that followed was deafening. Mara turned to face the assembled guests, saw Lady Ashford's calculating expression, saw other nobles whispering behind hands, saw Captain Rourke watching her with something that might have been respect. Anyone else? She asked quietly. Anyone else want to object? Make accusations? Try to stop this? No one moved. Good. Mara walked back to the altar, back to Kael, and took his hand, looked up at the priest who stood frozen with his book still open. We were in the middle of vows, I believe. The priest blinked. Yes, of course. He cleared his throat, found his place. Do you, Mara Harrow, take this man as your lawfully wedded husband to have and to hold? I do, Mara said before he could finish. And do you, Kael Thornridge? I do. The priest looked flustered. I haven't finished. We're finished waiting, Kael said. His hand tightened on Mara's. Unless there's something legally required we're missing. Well, no, but then pronounce us married. The priest's mouth worked. Then, with visible effort, he gathered himself. By the power vested in me by the Northern Church, I pronounce you husband and wife. Kael kissed her before the words fully landed. It was nothing like the careful kiss in the library. This was claim and promise and relief all tangled together. When he pulled back, his eyes held something Mara couldn't quite name. Welcome to Thornridge, Duchess. The title hit like a physical thing. Duchess. Not spare daughter, not forgotten sister. Duchess. The chapel erupted in polite applause, less enthusiastic than it should have been, but present. Mara held Kyle's arm and walked back down the aisle, past staring faces and whispered judgments, and out into the cold northern air. The moment the chapel doors closed behind them, her knees nearly buckled. Steady. Kyle's arm came around her waist, supporting. You were magnificent in there. I was terrified. You were both. He guided her toward the keep's entrance. But you stood your ground. That's what matters. Inside, the great hall had been prepared for the wedding feast. Tables laden with food, musicians ready in the corner, servants waiting to begin service. All of it suddenly felt surreal. Mara was married. To a duke. To a man she barely knew who'd just been publicly accused of murdering his first wife. Her life was insane. The feast was a blur. Mara sat at the high table, picking at food she couldn't taste, while nobles offered congratulations that felt more like condolences. Lady Ashford approached midway through the meal, wineglass in hand. That was quite a performance, Duchess. Mara set down her fork. It wasn't a performance. No? Lady Ashford's smile was thin. Standing up to your sister like that, very dramatic, very calculated. It was honest. Was it? The older woman leaned closer. Or was it exactly what you needed to do to convince everyone you weren't some scheming opportunist? Mara met her eyes. You're going to believe what you want regardless of what I say. So believe it. But know this. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not Elise, and I'm not afraid of you. Lady Ashford studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. No, I don't think you are. She raised her glass in a mock toast. Good luck, Duchess. You'll need it. She drifted away, leaving Mara's heart racing. Ignore her, Finn said quietly from Mara's other side. Ashford's been bitter since Elise died. She blames his grace, even though the fever was documented. Was it really just fever? Finn's expression was careful. Lady Elise was miserable here. That much is true. She came from the capital expecting elegance and society, and found stone walls in northern winters. The isolation ate at her, made her ill with stress. The fever was just the final straw. And Kyle tried everything, brought in entertainers, invited guests, offered to spend winters in the capital. She refused it all, said he'd ruined her life by bringing her here. Finn's voice dropped. By the end, she barely spoke to him, just locked herself away and waited to die. Mara looked down the table to where Kyle was speaking with Captain Rourke. He looked tired, older, like the weight of accusations was pressing down on him even now. He didn't hurt her, Finn said, not physically. But I think he blames himself for not saving her from herself. After the feast, there was dancing. Mara moved through the patterns mechanically, changing partners as tradition dictated. Lord Sterling, Captain Rourke, Finn. Each conversation carefully polite, carefully empty. Finally, near midnight, Kyle reclaimed her for the final waltz. You're exhausted, he observed. So are you. It's been a long day. His hand settled at her waist, and they moved into the familiar pattern. Thank you for not running when Lillian gave you an out. Did you think I would? For a moment. His honesty was startling. When she mentioned Elise, I saw doubt in your eyes. There was doubt. And you chose me anyway. I chose the truth. Mara met his gaze. Mrs. Rothwell didn't have to defend you. She could have stayed silent, but she spoke up. That meant something. She hated Elise. They fought constantly. But she was honest about the bruises, about the fever, about you not being in Elise's rooms. Mara's hand tightened on his shoulder. I'm choosing to believe that, but Kyle, if you ever lie to me, if I ever find out this was all, you won't. His voice was firm. I've had enough lies to last a lifetime. I want something real, remember? Then give me real, even when it's ugly, even when it's hard. Deal. The dance ended. The musicians packed up. Guests began drifting toward their assigned rooms, gossiping in clusters. Mara saw Anna waiting near the stairs, a question in her eyes. Go rest, Kyle said quietly. You've earned it. Mara wanted to argue, to prove she could handle more, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a tide. She nodded, Let Anna guide her upstairs to the blue room. You were brilliant today, Anna said, helping unlace the wedding gown. The way you faced down your sister, half the chapel was terrified of you. I was terrified of me. Good terrified or bad terrified? Mara thought about it. Both. I didn't know I could do that, stand up like that, but it felt right. That's because it was. Anna hung the gown carefully. You're not the same woman who left Harrow Hall. You're stronger. Or more reckless. Sometimes those are the same thing. After Anna left, Mara sat at the window in her nightgown, staring out at the dark mountains. Married. To a duke. Living in a fortress that still felt alien. She should feel triumphant, should feel like she'd won something. Instead, she just felt empty. A knock at the door startled her. Come in. Kael entered, also in nightclothes, hair loose around his shoulders. He looked different without the formal attire. Younger, more human. I'm not here for... He gestured vaguely. I know today was overwhelming. I just wanted to check on you. I'm fine. You're lying. Mara's laugh was tired. Yes, but I'll be fine. Eventually. Kael moved to the window, stood beside her looking out at the darkness. Elise used to stand here too. In the beginning, before things got bad. She'd stare out at the mountains and I'd catch this expression on her face, like she was calculating how far she'd have to run to escape. I'm not planning to run. I know. You would have done it already. He was quiet for a moment. What Lillian said today, about the servants gossiping, there was truth in it. People did talk. They saw Elise's misery and filled in the gaps with speculation. And you didn't stop them? How could I? I couldn't control what happened behind closed doors, and I couldn't force her to be happy. All I could do was try to make things easier, which failed. His jaw tightened. I failed her. Not the way Lillian implied, but I failed nonetheless. Mara turned to face him. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Can't I? Isn't that what I'm trying to do with you? The question hung between them. Mara thought about it, really thought about it. No, she said finally. You're not saving me. You're giving me a choice. That's different. Is it enough? Ask me in a year. Kael's smile was slight. Fair enough. He moved toward the door, then paused. I meant what I said earlier, about wanting something real. That includes the hard conversations, the ugly truths, all of it. Good, because I'm terrible at pretending. I know, it's one of your better qualities. After he left, Mara climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow she'd have to start learning how to be a duchess, how to manage this household, how to navigate the politics and expectations and judgment. Tomorrow she'd have to figure out how to live in a dead woman's shadow while carving out her own space. But tonight, she was just Mara, married, terrified, and somehow still standing. The next morning came too early. Anna woke her at dawn, already bustling with purpose. Mrs. Rothwell wants to see you. Something about household accounts. Mara groaned. Can it wait? She was very insistent. 20 minutes later, Mara sat in Mrs. Rothwell's office, a small, neat room off the main kitchen, while the housekeeper laid out ledgers and supply lists. Lady Elise never involved herself in these matters, Mrs. Rothwell said, her tone carefully neutral. She considered them beneath her station, but the household still needs to run, and decisions need to be made. Mara scanned the numbers. These meat costs seem high. The northern winters are harsh. We have to stock enough to last 6 months of snow. I understand that, but you're paying premium prices for cuts we could get cheaper if we source directly from farmers instead of through merchants. Mara pointed to a line item. Here, this middleman is taking a 30% markup. Cut him out, go straight to the source, and you save, she calculated quickly, about 200 gold annually. Mrs. Rothwell's eyebrows rose. You know trade? I managed my family's supplier contracts. Not everything, but enough to recognize markup when I see it. For the first time since Mara arrived, something shifted in the housekeeper's expression. Not warmth exactly, but respect. I'll look into direct sourcing, Mrs. Rothwell said. What about the household staff? Lady Elise wanted to hire additional maids from the capital. I've been holding those positions open. Why would we need capital maids? Lady Elise felt the northern staff lacked refinement. Mara thought about the servants she'd met, hardworking, loyal, efficient. Do you think the staff lacks refinement? Mrs. Rothwell's mouth twitched. No, Duchess, I do not. Then fill the positions locally, people who understand this place and how it runs. Mara closed the ledger. Anything else? The East Wing, Lady Elise's chambers. They've been locked since her death. His Grace hasn't been in them since... She paused. What would you like done with them? Mara stood. Show me. They walked through corridors Mara was still learning. Upstairs she hadn't yet climbed. The East Wing was older, quieter, filled with afternoon light that felt wrong after the keep's perpetual shadows. Mrs. Rothwell unlocked a heavy door and pushed it open. The Duchess's chambers were stunning. 3 large rooms, sitting area, bedroom, private bath, all decorated in soft blues and golds. Expensive furniture, silk curtains, a canopy bed that probably cost more than Mara's entire childhood wardrobe. And dust. Everywhere. 3 years of undisturbed dust, coating surfaces, hanging in the air. Lady Elise redecorated extensively, Mrs. Rothwell said. His Grace paid for all of it, hoping it would make her happy. Did it? For about a month? Then she found new things to be unhappy about. Mara walked through the rooms, trailing fingers along furniture, studying the space. It was beautiful, impersonal, like a museum display of what a duchess should want. Clean it out, she said finally. Mrs. Rothwell's eyes widened. All of it? Everything. Donate the furniture to families in the valley who need it. Use the fabrics for something practical. Turn these rooms into, I don't know, a library annex, guest quarters, storage, anything but a shrine. And where will you stay? The blue room is fine. It's smaller, but it's mine. Mara met the housekeeper's gaze. I'm not Elise. I won't try to be. So let's stop pretending I should fit into her life. Mrs. Rothwell studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded, sharp and decisive. I'll have the staff begin tomorrow. Thank you. Duchess? Mrs. Rothwell's voice stopped her at the door. For what it's worth, I'm glad you stood up to your sister yesterday. Took courage. Or stupidity. Sometimes those are the same thing. The housekeeper's smile was slight. You'll do well here, if you let yourself. Word of the East Wing spread through the household like wildfire. By dinner, Mara caught servants looking at her differently. Not quite friendly, but not hostile either. Curious, reassessing. You're making waves, Finn observed that evening. Mrs. Rothwell actually smiled today. I didn't think her face could do that. She's not so bad, just protective of this place. And you're proving you might actually fit here. Finn raised his glass. Bold move clearing out Elise's chambers. Or foolish. Bold, KL said from across the table. Definitely bold. He'd been quiet all day, attending to business Mara didn't fully understand yet, but his eyes tracked her movements, and she felt the weight of his attention like heat. That night, he knocked on her door again. Am I interrupting? He asked. No, come in. He entered carrying 2 glasses and a bottle of wine. I thought we could talk. Actually talk, now that the chaos has settled. They settled by the fire, glasses filled. For a moment, neither spoke. The East Wing, Kael said finally. Thank you. I should have cleared it out years ago, but I couldn't. It's done now. Yes. He studied his wine. You're changing things, the household, people's expectations. It's good, but it's also drawing attention. Bad attention? Complicated attention. Lady Ashford wrote to 3 other families today, spreading gossip about yesterday's chapel incident. By week's end, half the Reach will have heard about Lillian's accusations. Mara's stomach sank. And they'll believe her. Some will. Others will wait to see what happens, which means you're under scrutiny. Kael's expression was serious. Everything you do now gets analyzed. Every choice, every word. They're looking for proof you're either a schemer or a victim. What if I'm neither? Then you'll have to prove it, which won't be easy. Mara thought about the ledgers, the East Wing, the small changes she'd already started making. What if I just keep being myself, keep making practical decisions, and let the results speak? That's the smartest approach, but it's also the hardest. Kael leaned forward. Because yourself isn't what they expected. and people hate having their expectations challenged. Too bad for them. His laugh was surprised, genuine. That's what I'm talking about. That spine, don't lose it. 3 weeks passed in a blur of learning. Mara memorized servants' names, studied the keep's history, rode out to meet tenants in the valley. She made mistakes, called people by wrong titles, misunderstood northern customs, accidentally insulted a visiting lord by seating him wrong at dinner. But she also made progress. The household accounts balanced better. The staff warmed fractionally. And slowly, painfully, Mara began to feel less like an imposter. Then the letter arrived. Mrs. Rothwell brought it to breakfast, her expression troubled. This came by courier, from Harrow Hall. Mara's appetite vanished. She broke the seal with shaking hands. It was from her mother. Short, brutal. Lillian is engaged. Lord Ashford's nephew. Not as prestigious as a duke, but respectable. The wedding is in 2 months. We will not be inviting you. In future, do not attempt contact with this family. You made your choice. Live with it. Catherine Harrow. Mara read it twice, then carefully folded it and set it beside her plate. Bad news? Kyle asked quietly. Lillian's getting married. That was fast. Lady Ashford probably arranged it. A final insult, marrying Lillian to her nephew just to prove a point. Mara's hands were steady, but her voice wasn't. They're cutting me off completely, making it official. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's cleaner this way. She stood. I need air. She made it to the stables before the tears came, pressed her face against her mare's neck and let herself cry for the family she'd lost, the sister who hated her, the life she'd burned to the ground. When she finally pulled herself together, she found Garrett, the stable master, watching from the tack room. Rough morning, Duchess? Mara wiped her eyes. Something like that. For what it's worth, you're doing better than most think. The staff's noticed. You're not afraid to get your hands dirty. Respect that around here. Even though I'm the scandalous sister stealer, Garrett's grin was crooked. Especially because of that. Shows you've got fight in you. We like fight. It was a small thing, but it helped. That afternoon, Mara made a decision. If she was going to be cut off from her past, she'd build something new. Something that was entirely hers. She called a household meeting. Every servant, from senior staff to kitchen girls, gathered in the great hall looking confused and wary. Mara stood at the front, heart pounding, and addressed them directly. I know most of you didn't want me here. You had a duchess you were loyal to, and I'm not her. You've been patient while I stumble through learning this place, and I appreciate that. But I want to be clear about something. She paused, making sure she had their attention. I'm not trying to replace Lady Elise. I'm not trying to make this place into something it's not. I'm just trying to make it work. Make it better if I can. And I need your help to do that. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Rothwell watched with sharp eyes. So here's what I'm proposing, Mara continued. If you have ideas, ways to improve efficiency, solve problems, make this household run smoother, bring them to me. Not to prove I'm incompetent, but because you know this place better than I ever will, and I'm smart enough to listen. More murmurs. Some skeptical, some interested. I can't promise I'll always make the right call. I'm still learning, but I can promise I'll be honest. I'll work hard, and I won't ask you to do anything I wouldn't do myself. She stepped down, heart racing. For a moment, no one moved. Then Garrett stepped forward. Got a thought about the south pasture drainage, if you're interested. I am. And the kitchen stores could use reorganizing, Cook added. Been saying so for years, but Lady Elise wouldn't. She stopped. Well, point is, I've got ideas. One by one, servants approached, some with suggestions, some just to introduce themselves properly. It wasn't overwhelming support, but it was a start. Mrs. Rothwell waited until the crowd dispersed, then approached Mara with something that might have been approval in her eyes. That was well done, Duchess. Was it? I felt like I was begging. You were showing humility, very different from Lady Elise's approach. The housekeeper's expression softened fractionally. She wanted to command respect. You're earning it. That's harder, but it lasts longer. That night when Kyle found her in the library, she was surrounded by papers, notes from servants, ideas to implement, problems to solve. What's all this? He asked. The household. I asked for input. Got more than I expected. Mara looked up at him. Is that all right? I should have asked you first. It's brilliant. And it's yours to manage. He sat across from her, studying the organized chaos. You're really doing this. Making this place yours. Trying to, slowly. That's all anyone can ask. Kale reached across the desk, took her hand. You know what the best part is? What? Watching you become the woman I saw in that stable, the one who spoke honestly instead of performing. She's been hiding under layers of doubt, but she's coming through. Mara's throat tightened. What if she's not enough? She already is. 2 months after the wedding, Lady Ashford hosted a regional gathering at her estate. An annual tradition, Finn explained, where northern nobility gathered to discuss trade and politics. And to gossip. You don't have to attend, Kyle said. Given the circumstances, I need to attend. Mara met his eyes. They're all waiting to see if I'll hide or if I'll face them. I vote for facing them. It won't be pleasant. Nothing about this has been pleasant. Doesn't mean I can run from it. The gathering was exactly as awful as Mara expected. Nobles she didn't know whispering behind fans. Deliberate snubs. Conversations that died when she approached. And in the center of it all, Lady Ashford with Lillian at her side. Her sister looked beautiful, thinner than Mara remembered, with shadows under her eyes, but beautiful nonetheless. The nephew she was apparently engaged to stood protectively nearby, a decent-looking man with kind eyes. When Lillian's gaze finally met Mara's across the room, there was no recognition, no acknowledgement, just cold, empty nothing. It hurt more than anger would have. Duchess Thornridge? Lady Ashford appeared at Mara's elbow, voice dripping false sweetness. How lovely that you could join us. I wasn't sure you'd have the courage. I wasn't sure you'd have the grace to invite me, Mara replied evenly. But here we both are, surprising each other. Lady Ashford's smile tightened. Yes, well, I do hope you're settling well at the Keep, such a challenging place for Southern girls. I'm not from the South. No, but you're certainly not from the North either, are you? She gestured to where Lillian stood. Your sister seems to be adjusting beautifully to her new circumstances. Such a resilient girl. She always has been, Mara agreed. I'm glad she's happy. Are you? Lady Ashford's eyes gleamed. Because from where I'm standing, you destroyed her future and don't seem particularly bothered by it. I'm bothered, Mara said quietly. Every day. But I'm also living with my choice, just like she's living with hers. Before Lady Ashford could respond, Lillian appeared beside her aunt. Mara, the name was cold, foreign. Enjoying yourself? Not particularly. Good. Lillian's smile was sharp. Wouldn't want you to feel too comfortable. That would be a shame. They stared at each other, two sisters who'd once shared everything now separated by a chasm too wide to bridge. Your dress is lovely, Mara said finally. The color suits you. Don't, Lillian's voice cracked. Don't pretend we can be civil. Don't act like we're still sisters. You burned that bridge. I know. Then stop talking to me like we're friends catching up. Lillian's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You chose him. You chose that life. So go live it and leave me alone. She walked away, her fiancé following with an apologetic glance. Mara stood frozen, Lady Ashford's smug expression boring into her side. Well, the older woman said, that went about as expected. Yes, Mara agreed. It did. She found Kyle in the gardens an hour later, pretending to admire roses while clearly waiting for her. How bad was it? He asked. Exactly as bad as it needed to be. Mara leaned against him, suddenly exhausted. Lillian hates me. Lady Ashford is spreading poison, and half the gathering thinks I'm either a schemer or an idiot. And the other half? Reserve judgment, which I'll take. Kael's arm came around her shoulders. You want to leave? No, because leaving would prove I can't handle the pressure, and I can handle it. She pulled back, met his eyes. I just need to stop caring what they think and focus on what actually matters. Which is? Building something real, making Thornridge work, proving I'm not the villain in Lillian's story, I'm just the protagonist in my own. Kael smiled, slow and genuine. There she is. Who? The woman who stood in that chapel and told your sister to get out. The one who's not afraid to fight. I'm terrified. But you're fighting anyway. That's courage. They stayed in the gardens until sunset, avoiding the gathering, just existing in the quiet together. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't grand, but it was real. And for the first time since the wedding, Mara felt like maybe, just maybe, she could actually do this. By the time they returned to Thornridge Keep, night had fully claimed the mountains. Mara stood in the courtyard watching servants unload their travel bags and felt something settle in her chest that hadn't been there before. Not peace, not quite, but resolution. "You're different," Anna observed later, helping her out of the traveling dress. Something changed at that gathering. "I stopped waiting for permission," Mara said. "Permission to be here, permission to matter. I'm done apologizing for existing." About time. The next morning, Mara woke with purpose. She dressed quickly, skipped breakfast, and went straight to Mrs. Rothwell's office. "I need the full household records," she said. "Everything, income, expenses, staffing, maintenance schedules, all of it." Mrs. Rothwell's eyebrows rose. "That's a considerable amount of information, Duchess." "I know, but I can't manage what I don't understand, and I'm tired of stumbling around half blind." Something shifted in the housekeeper's expression. Approval, sharp and unmistakable. "I'll have everything ready by noon." Mara spent the next 3 days buried in ledgers. She mapped every expense, tracked every pattern, identified waste and inefficiency that had been accumulating for years. Some of it was Elise's doing, expensive imports that went unused, staff positions that existed only for show. But some of it was older, deeper, the kind of institutional rot that happened when no one was paying attention. She made lists, drew charts, calculated savings, and then she called a meeting with Kyle, Finn, and Captain Rourke. "The household is bleeding money," she said, laying out her findings. "Not catastrophically, but steadily. Little things adding up over years." Kyle studied her charts. "I knew we were overspending, didn't realize how much. It's fixable, but it requires changes people won't like." Mara pointed to specific line items. "The formal dinners Elise instituted, importing capital delicacies for guests who barely touch them. We can serve northern cuisine instead, save 300 gold annually. The extra maids she wanted hired, we don't need them. The staff we have is sufficient if we reorganize duties." "What about the East Wing renovations?" Finn asked. "Those were expensive." "Already accounted for. I stopped them." Mara met Kyle's eyes. "I know you said I could do what I wanted with those chambers. I'm choosing to close them entirely. Move guest quarters to the West Wing, convert the East to storage, saves on heating, maintenance, everything." Kyle was quiet for a moment, then, "Do it. People will talk. Say I'm dishonoring Elise's memory. Let them talk." His voice was firm. "This is your household now. Make it work." Over the next month, Mara implemented changes with ruthless efficiency. She cut unnecessary expenses, reorganized staff duties, renegotiated supplier contracts. Not everyone was happy. Cook complained about losing fancy ingredients. Some servants grumbled about additional responsibilities. But the household accounts started balancing, then improving, then actually showing a surplus for the first time in years. Word spread, not just through the keep, but beyond. Other northern estates started asking questions. How had Thornridge turned around its finances so quickly? What was the new Duchess doing that previous management hadn't? Letters arrived, invitations to social events Mara would have been excluded from months ago, requests for advice on household management. "You're becoming influential," Finn observed one evening. "The northern families are noticing." "They're noticing the numbers," Mara corrected. "Money talks louder than scandal." "Maybe, but you're the one making it happen." 3 months after the disastrous gathering, Lady Ashford sent an unexpected letter. Not to Mara, to Kyle, but he showed it to her anyway. "Your Grace, I'm hosting a winter summit for Northern Estates. Given Thornridge's recent fiscal improvements, I'd be interested in hearing the Duchess's insights on household management. Several other ladies have expressed similar interest. I hope you'll both attend." Lady Ashford. Mara read it twice. "This is a trap." "Probably," Kale agreed. "She's not known for sudden changes of heart, but it's also an opportunity." "To prove what? That I'm not completely incompetent?" "To prove you're exactly as competent as you've been demonstrating." He set the letter down. "What do you want to do?" Mara thought about it, about Lillian, who'd be there, about nobles who still whispered behind fans, about Lady Ashford, who'd probably orchestrated this whole thing to publicly humiliate her. "I want to go," she said finally, "and I want to show them exactly what I've built." The winter summit was held at Ashford Manor, a sprawling estate that made Thornridge Keep look austere by comparison. Mara arrived with Kael, dressed in northern colors, deep gray silk with silver embroidery, and carrying a leather portfolio of household accounts and improvement plans. "Nervous?" Kael asked as their carriage pulled up. "Terrified, but doing it anyway." The gathering was smaller than the previous one, maybe 30 people, mostly women. Wives and daughters of northern lords, all dressed impeccably, all watching Mara with varying degrees of curiosity and hostility. Lady Ashford greeted them with icy politeness. "Duchess Thornridge, how good of you to come." "Thank you for the invitation, Lady Ashford, though I admit I'm curious about this sudden interest in my household management skills. Let's just say your reputation precedes you." Lady Ashford's smile was sharp. "Several of us have been comparing notes. Thornridge's improvements are noteworthy." "They're practical," Mara said. "Nothing revolutionary, just paying attention." "Yes, well, we'll see about that," Lady Ashford gestured to the assembled women. "Ladies, shall we begin?" They gathered in a formal sitting room arranged in a loose circle. Mara sat between two women she didn't know, very aware that Lillian was directly across from her. Her sister looked thinner than before, with shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. Their eyes met for half a heartbeat. Lillian looked away first. "So," Lady Ashford began, "Duchess Thornridge has graciously agreed to share her insights on estate management. I thought we might all benefit from her perspective." The word dripped condescension. Several women exchanged knowing looks. Mara opened her portfolio. "I'm happy to share what's worked at Thornridge, though I should note I'm still learning. I've made plenty of mistakes." "We'd love to hear about those," one woman said, tone saccharine. "The mistakes, I mean. So instructive." "Of course." Mara refused to take the bait. "My biggest mistake early on was trying to implement changes too quickly. I alienated staff who'd been doing things a certain way for years. I learned to slow down, explain my reasoning, bring people along instead of forcing compliance." "And your successes?" another woman asked, this one seeming genuinely interested. "Direct sourcing saved us about 30% on provisions. Reorganizing staff duties eliminated 3 unnecessary positions while actually improving efficiency. And closing unused sections of the keep cut heating costs by nearly half." Murmurs rippled through the room. Someone, Lady Sterling, Mara thought, leaned forward. "You closed sections of the keep?" "The East Wing. It was expensive to maintain and rarely used. We consolidated everything to the west and central sections." "But that was Lady Elise's wing," Lady Ashford said sharply. "Where she lived." "It was." Mara met her gaze directly. "And it was sitting empty, accumulating dust and draining resources. I chose practicality over sentiment." "How very cold of you." "How very practical of her," Lady Sterling interjected. "We've been maintaining empty wings at our estate, too. Never thought to close them." The conversation shifted. Women started asking real questions about supplier contracts, staff organization, budget allocation. Mara answered honestly, sharing both successes and failures. The atmosphere slowly changed from hostile testing to genuine curiosity. All except Lillian, who sat silent and rigid, staring at her hands. After an hour, Lady Ashford called for refreshments. Women dispersed into smaller groups, several approaching Mara to continue discussions privately. "That was impressive," Lady Sterling said quietly. "I expected Ashford to eviscerate you. Instead, you've got half the room asking for advice." "I just answered questions honestly." "Exactly. No performance, no pretense." Lady Sterling's smile was genuine. "That's refreshing. Most of us spend so much energy maintaining appearances we forget actual competence matters more." Lillian appeared at Mara's elbow, so suddenly Mara startled. "Can we talk?" her sister asked, voice low. "Privately?" Mara's heart kicked. "Of course." They slipped out to a small garden room, empty and cold. Lillian closed the door behind them and leaned against it, arms wrapped around herself. For a long moment, neither spoke. "You're good at this," Lillian said finally. "The Duchess thing. Better than anyone expected." Thank you. It's not a compliment. It's just, Lillian's voice cracked. It's just observation. You walked into a situation designed to destroy you, and you're thriving. How? I'm not thriving. I'm surviving. There's a difference. Is there? Lillian finally looked up, and Mara saw tears tracking down her face. Because from where I'm standing, you got everything. The Duke, the title, respect. And I got, she gestured helplessly, Lord Ashford's nephew. A man I barely know who agreed to marry me because his aunt arranged it. Because I was the consolation prize. Mara's chest tightened. Lily, don't call me that. But there was no venom in it, just exhaustion. I've spent 4 months hating you, actively, viciously hating you. And I'm tired, Mara. I'm so tired of being angry. Then stop. I don't know how. Lillian sank into a chair. Everyone keeps telling me to move on, to be happy with my new engagement, to accept what happened and adjust. But how do I adjust to having my entire future stolen in front of 100 people? It wasn't stolen. It changed. Mara sat across from her. You think I got everything, but Lily, I lost my family. I live in a fortress full of people who still compare me to a dead woman. I wake up every day terrified I'll fail and prove everyone right about me being unworthy. But you're not failing. Not yet. But it's only been 4 months. Ask me again in a year. Or 5. Mara leaned forward. You want the truth? The real ugly truth? Lillian nodded. I think about you every day. Wonder if you're okay. If you hate me. If there's any chance we could ever… Mara's voice broke. Ever be sisters again, and every day I realize that chance gets smaller, because I made a choice that hurt you, and there's no taking it back. Then why did you do it? Because staying in the shadows was killing me. Mara met her sister's eyes. I spent 23 years being invisible, being the spare, the one who didn't matter. And when Kyle looked at me like I did matter, I couldn't walk away from that, even knowing it would destroy us. Lillian was quiet for a long time. Then, do you love him? I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe I just love being seen. Mara's laugh was bitter. Either way, I'm stuck with the choice. Are you happy? The question hung between them. Mara thought about it, really thought about it. I'm satisfied, she said finally. I built something, made it work, proved I could be more than what everyone expected. That's not the same as happy, but it's something. It's more than I have. Lillian wiped her eyes. I'm not happy, Mara. I'm going through motions. Smiling when expected, pretending this engagement is what I wanted when really it's just… She stopped. Just the best I could get after you took the best option. I'm sorry. Are you? Really? Mara met her sister's gaze. I'm sorry it hurt you. I'm sorry our family fell apart. I'm sorry you got caught in the blast when I chose myself. But am I sorry I married him? No. Lillian flinched, but something in her expression shifted. Not forgiveness, but maybe the beginning of acceptance. I can't forgive you, she said quietly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm tired of hating you, so maybe we can just exist separately, without actively destroying each other. I can live with that. Good. Lillian stood. Because Aunt Ashford is going to spend the rest of this summit trying to get me to publicly denounce you. And I'm not going to do it. Not because I forgive you, but because I'm done being her weapon. She left without another word. Mara sat alone in the garden room, feeling something crack and shift in her chest. Not healing, not yet, but maybe the first step toward it. When she returned to the gathering, Lady Ashford was holding court, clearly waiting for her. Duchess Thornridge, we were just discussing your rather radical approach to household management. Some of us wonder if such dramatic changes are truly sustainable. They've been sustainable for 4 months, Mara said evenly. And the numbers don't lie. Numbers can be manipulated. They can, but mine aren't. Mara pulled out her most recent ledger, laid it on the table. Here, every expense, every saving, every decision documented. Anyone who wants to verify is welcome to examine it. Lady Ashford's smile tightened. How very transparent of you. I learned from the best. Mara met her gaze. You taught me something important at the last gathering, Lady Ashford. You showed me that performance matters less than results. that people respect competence more than breeding. So I stopped performing and started producing results. I taught you no such thing. Didn't you? You arranged for Lillian to marry your nephew specifically to prove a point about my unworthiness. You thought watching her move on would break me. Instead, it freed me to focus entirely on making Thornridge work. Mara's smile was slight. So thank you. The room had gone very quiet. Lady Ashford's face cycled through several shades of red. You're welcome, she said finally, each word clipped. The gathering ended an hour later. As Mara and Kyle prepared to leave, Lady Sterling approached one last time. You made an enemy today, she said quietly. Ashford doesn't forgive being outmaneuvered. I didn't outmaneuver her. I just stopped letting her control the narrative. Same thing, in her mind. Lady Sterling smiled. But you also made allies. Several of us would like to visit Thornridge, see these changes firsthand. If you're willing to host, I'd be honored. Over the next months, visitors came. Northern ladies interested in improving their own estates. Younger women looking for models of practical competence. Even a few men, though they pretended to be there for business with Kyle. Mara hosted them all with the same transparent honesty she'd shown at the summit. She shared her successes and failures equally, showed them the household accounts, let them talk to staff directly. And slowly, her reputation shifted. Not from scandalous sister stealer to beloved duchess. That would never happen. But from incompetent opportunist to someone who actually knew what she was doing. 6 months after the wedding, a letter arrived from an unexpected source. Mara's father. She almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. Mara, I'm writing against your mother's wishes. She'd be furious if she knew. Word has reached us of your work at Thornridge, the financial improvements, the household reorganization. I won't pretend this changes anything between us. You made your choice and I made mine, but I wanted you to know that I see what you've built. You were always better with numbers than anyone gave you credit for. I should have utilized that instead of keeping you in the stables. That was my mistake. Your mother will never forgive you. Lillian may never forgive you. But I'm man enough to admit when I've misjudged someone's capabilities. Don't write back, but know that I'm watching, and I'm not displeased. Marcus Harrow. Mara read it 3 times, then carefully burned it in the fireplace. Bad news? Kyle asked, finding her watching the flames. Complicated news. She turned to face him. My father basically admitted I'm good at this, but he's still not talking to me officially. That's something. Is it? Or is it just him hedging his bets in case I become too successful to ignore? Does it matter? Mara thought about it. No, I suppose it doesn't. I'm not doing this for his approval anyway. What are you doing it for? Honestly, because it's satisfying. Building something that works, proving I can. She moved to the window, looking out at the darkening mountains. And because for the first time in my life, I'm not invisible. Kale came to stand beside her. You were never invisible, just overlooked. There's a difference. Either way, I'm done with it. Winter came hard that year. Snow buried the valley for weeks, isolating Thornridge from the rest of the Reach. Mara spent those months working even more closely with the household, planning for spring, organizing supplies, keeping staff morale up during the brutal cold. She also spent them getting to know her husband, not in the romantic, swept-away sense she'd once imagined marriage might be, but in the quiet, practical way of 2 people learning to coexist. They had dinner together most evenings, discussing estate business and northern politics. They rode out together when weather permitted. They built something that wasn't quite friendship and wasn't quite love, but was solid and real. One night, snowed in with wind howling outside, they sat by the library fire sharing wine. Do you regret it? Mara asked. Choosing me over her? Kale was quiet for a moment. No. Do you regret saying yes? Not anymore. I did at first. Those first few weeks were hell, but now? She considered. Now I'm glad I took the risk, even if it cost everything. It didn't cost everything. You still have yourself. That's more than I had before. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire. Then Kyle asked, what would you have become if I'd chosen Lillian instead? Probably married off to some minor lord, managed his household quietly, faded into obscurity. Mara's smile was slight. Nothing terrible, just small. I'm glad you're not small. Me too. Spring came late, but when it did, it brought news. Lillian had married Lord Ashford's nephew in a quiet ceremony. The announcement was brief, formal, devoid of any personal detail. Mara sent a gift, a set of household ledgers and account books, professionally bound. No note, just the practical tools for managing an estate. She never heard if Lillian received them. 2 months later, another gathering, this one hosted by Lady Sterling, who'd become something approximating a friend. I wanted you to see what you've started, Lady Sterling said, showing Mara around her reorganized household. Direct sourcing, consolidated staff duties, closed maintenance on the south wing. We're saving almost 40% compared to last year. That's incredible. That's your influence. Half the northern estates have implemented some version of your changes. Lady Sterling's smile was genuine. You've become something of a legend, the practical duchess. That's the worst title I've ever heard, but accurate. And in the north, practicality is the highest compliment. At the gathering that evening, Mara found herself surrounded by women asking questions, sharing their own innovations, building on what she'd started. It felt strange. Good, but strange. She was standing alone for a moment when Lady Ashford approached. Duchess Thornridge, enjoying your triumph? It's not a triumph, Lady Ashford. It's just estates running more efficiently. Don't be modest. You've changed how half the Reach manages their households. That's power. Lady Ashford's expression was carefully neutral. I wanted to apologize. Mara blinked. I'm sorry? For the chapel incident. For encouraging your sister's accusations. For trying to destroy you. Lady Ashford took a breath. I was loyal to Elise. She was a friend, and I blamed your husband for her death. When you appeared, I saw an opportunity for revenge. That was wrong. Why tell me now? Because you've proven yourself. And because Lillian asked me to. Lady Ashford's smile was thin. She's not ready to speak to you directly, but she wanted me to stop actively working against you. Consider this compliance. Consider it accepted. After Lady Ashford left, Mara stood alone processing the conversation. An apology. From the woman who'd spent months trying to destroy her. She'd won. Not completely, not perfectly, but she'd won. That night, back at Thornridge, Mara stood at her window, watching moonlight on snow. Behind her, Kyle entered without knocking, a habit they'd developed over months of late-night conversations. You're thinking loudly, he observed. Just processing. A year ago, I was invisible. Now I'm the practical duchess, apparently. Terrible title. That's what I said. Mara turned to face him. Do you think we'll ever have what other people call love? The romantic kind? Cale considered. I don't know. Maybe we already do, and it just looks different than we expected. What do you mean? I respect you. Admire what you've built. Look forward to our evenings together. Find myself thinking about you when we're apart. He moved closer. If that's not love, it's close enough for me. Mara thought about it. Thought about how she felt safe with him, challenged by him, seen by him. How she'd rather spend evenings in the library with Kyle than anywhere else. Close enough for me, too, she said, finally. A year and a half after the wedding, Mara received an unexpected visitor. Lillian arrived without warning, without her husband, looking windblown and exhausted. I need help, she said without preamble. Our estate is in trouble. My husband's good at many things, but numbers aren't one of them. We're hemorrhaging money, and I don't know how to stop it. Mara studied her sister, thinner, older, with lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, but also something else. Something harder. Come in, she said. They spent 3 days going through Ashford's estate accounts. Mara showed Lillian everything she'd learned. How to identify waste, reorganize expenses, negotiate better contracts. They worked side by side like they hadn't in years, focused on numbers instead of wounds. On the last evening, over wine in the library, Lillian finally spoke the words that had been hanging between them. I don't forgive you, but I understand now why you said yes. She met Mara's eyes. Being invisible is its own kind of death. I get that now. What changed? Marriage to someone who sees me as a trophy, who loves the idea of Lady Lillian but has no interest in actual Lillian. Her smile was bitter. Turns out being chosen for the wrong reasons is worse than not being chosen at all. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's honest, at least. And honesty is better than performance. Lillian raised her glass. To making terrible choices and living with them? To making our own choices, Mara corrected. Terrible or not, they drank. It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't reconciliation, but it was something. 2 years after the wedding, Mara stood in the Great Hall addressing the assembled Northern Estates, a formal summit hosted at Thornridge discussing region-wide financial reforms. She'd become the voice they listened to, not because of her title, not because of scandal, but because she'd proven herself through consistent, practical competence. The changes I'm proposing aren't radical, she said, laying out comprehensive plans. They're just paying attention, reducing waste, investing smartly, things any well-run estate should do. Afterward, Lady Sterling approached with several other noble women. You know what you've become? Lady Sterling asked. The practical Duchess? No. Though that too, Lady Sterling smiled. You've become proof that choosing yourself isn't selfish, that fighting for what you want, even when it costs everything, can lead somewhere worth going. Mara thought about that, about the family she'd lost, the sister who'd never fully forgive her, the life she'd burned to the ground, and about what she'd built from the ashes. Is it worth it? She asked. Really? Ask yourself. Mara looked around the great hall, at the estate she'd transformed, at the respect she'd earned, at Kael, watching from across the room with something warm in his expression, at the life she'd chosen, despite the cost. Yes, she said finally, it's worth it. That night, alone with Kael in their chambers, she'd finally moved into proper Duchess's quarters. Newly renovated to her taste, Mara allowed herself to acknowledge the truth. She'd become the villain in Lillian's story, the woman who stole her sister's future, the selfish opportunist who chose her own happiness over family loyalty. But she'd also become the protagonist of her own life, the woman who stopped hiding, who built something real from nothing, who proved that wanting more wasn't a crime. The world would never fully forgive her for stepping out of the shadows, for taking what wasn't meant for her, for choosing herself over everyone else's expectations. And she'd learned to live with that, because standing beside Kael, managing an estate that thrived under her leadership, earning respect through competence instead of performance, this life was hers, fully, completely, irrevocably hers, built on betrayal, yes, on choices that destroyed others to elevate her, but built nonetheless. And in the harsh northern winters of Thornridge Keep, surrounded by people who'd learned to value her for what she could do instead of who she was supposed to be, Mara finally understood what it meant to be free. Not forgiven, not redeemed, not transformed into some noble heroine who'd suffered beautifully and emerged pure. Just free. To make mistakes. To build something. To matter. She stood at the window watching snow fall, Kael's arm around her shoulders, and let herself feel it. The weight of choices made, bridges burned, futures stolen and rebuilt. No regrets? Kael asked quietly. Mara thought about everything she'd lost, everything she'd gained, the woman she'd been in the shadows versus the woman she'd become in the light. Plenty of regrets, she said honestly. But not this. Never this. He kissed her temple, and they stood together watching the darkness. Two people who'd chosen each other despite every reason not to, building a life that was messy and complicated and real. And in the morning, Mara would wake and continue being exactly what she'd fought to become. Not the chosen one, not the perfect daughter, not the woman everyone expected. Just herself. Flawed, ambitious, uncompromising, free. The Duchess of Thornridge. A title she'd taken, not inherited, earned through ruthless practicality and stubborn refusal to disappear. And she wore it like armor forged from every judgment, every whisper, every accusation, transformed into something sharp and unbreakable. Standing in that window, in that moment, Mara knew the truth. She would never be the hero of everyone's story, but she was finally the protagonist of her own, and that was enough.